Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we're talking about the Freedom Trucker Convoy yet again because it is continuing to heat up. And we're going to start today going over to Ambassador Bridge and taking a deep dive, sort of breakdown of what's going on there on that bridge in particular, because it's a very interesting juncture right there between Michigan and Windsor, which is a small town in Canada. And we've got the entire Canadian hierarchy that is now coming out of the woodwork to make sure that this blockade that is taking place on this bridge stops. We're going from top to bottom. Justin Trudeau, of course, the Prime Minister, came out, had a very strong statement about resolving this. We have then one level down, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, kind of like a governor. And then we have at the lower level, the mayor, Drew Dilkens. We heard from him yesterday, but he was out again saying, look, this is a big deal. You know, now they're not just honking horns, driving the Ottawa citizens crazy. Now they're stopping hundreds of millions of dollars potentially of trade. And we have some very big business, very curious business owners who want this resolved ASAP. And so we're going to take a look a lot about what's going on there. And then we're going to look at the other side of the border because, of course, Canada, we've been really focused on Canada and what their response has been. But the United States, of course, is their biggest trading partner. Our biggest trading partner, right? Canada, one of them. And so we have to make sure as a country in the United States, you'd think, well, that this doesn't happen here because they're under insurrection there in Ottawa. And, you know, of course, the Biden administration, the Department of Homeland Security, Jen Psaki, you know, people like Pete Buttigieg, the Department of Transportation, they don't want to be under insurrection there. I mean, we already had our own insurrection. What happens if they come and try to take the podium again? Woo, the whole thing might fall apart. And so we are going to take a look at this because they are now responding. The Department of Homeland Security came out, issued a new memo that basically says, if you like the show, well, you're supporting a terrorist because basically you're talking to a terrorist. According to this new memo, anybody who says that the government is kind of useless is basically a terrorist, undermining government institutions, which is kind of the entire job of a defense attorney, to say you're wrong police, you're wrong prosecutor, you're wrong judge, the government is terrible, they do everything wrong, everything they touch fails. It's like our whole job. So terrorists now, and apparently there's a couple hundred of you watching right now also terrorists. So that's how this is going to go. We're going to go through that memo, and I'm not kidding about this. Like, that's what it says. And they put this memo out on February 7th because of the idea that maybe the trucker convoy is going to be spreading around throughout the rest of the United States. And so we'll spend some time on that. We are going to also be warned by the Department of Homeland Security that the Freedom Trucker Convoy could even interfere with the Super Bowl. And that's when people really get mad, when they're, you know, and there's a problem interfering with that. Big issues. And as we go through this, we're going to hear a lot more from the Freedom Trucker Convoy because they issued a press release yesterday, late last night, and I clipped it, and I want to go through it in detail because we're learning a lot more about them and their sort of what their mission is, what their plan is, and what the strategies are behind sort of resolving this. Are they willing to negotiate? We're going to hear. It sounds like certainly they are. It's the other side, the government, that has been less than willing to communicate. So we're going to go through that. And I actually have a slide on here where we're going to do a quick crash course on traffic ticket defense. Been a traffic ticket defense / criminal / felony / DUI lawyer for a very long time. When I started practicing law, a big part of my practice was around traffic tickets. It's kind of one of the things you kind of get started on. And so I've successfully resolved a lot of traffic tickets. Our law firm over the years has done a lot of these things. And so now that the Ottawa City Council and now that the police from multiple different areas are going to be crashing down upon the truckers, I was thinking, oh, well, I've got some techniques that I've used that have been useful for me, and we can just have a little educational seminar about maybe some strategies or techniques that might be useful if you get cited with a traffic ticket. So I have a whole slide on that. We'll break that down. Viva was on the streets, and Viva actually got featured on Breitbart News. Viva was posted up there, Canadian YouTuber has a message about the media. And so I clipped a little bit of that, which is a cool thing to see him on Breitbart scrolling through the news, and there he is. And so that was a lot of fun. We'll check in on that. And then we will support his argument. He's saying the media is terrible. They're garbage. They're manipulating the truth here. Well, we have got a montage that came out from somebody on Twitter that shows that. A very clear disconnect between reality and what the media is showing the general public. We've got several people who are sort of supporting this claim. There's a nurse who was really getting into it with somebody with the CBC on the side of the road. We'll listen to a little bit of that. There's somebody named Rupa Subramanya who wrote a very interesting blog today over at the Barry Weiss blog, sort of a guest blog. And I actually posted that on the brand new Telegram channel, which is linked down in the description below. There's a Telegram channel for Robert Gouveia, where as I'm doing some show prep, I'm dumping some stuff in there. So if you want to follow me over there, please feel free to do that. Probably going to be posting over there more than anywhere else because it's very easy to post. I can just copy, paste right from my other tools right into there. And check it out. It's down in the description below. But the article is very good. It's saying that haven't seen any of that racist, sort of scandalous behavior that they were talking about. And so we'll clip from that. And then, of course, we'll wrap up the show by seeing how the Freedom Trucker Convoy is doing with the jerry cans, because it seems like it's kind of a successful strategy for them. And so we'll leave it there. And that means, as you can tell, boy, do we have a lot to get to. And if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And there is a comment thread over there. Looks something just like this. And that is available for your questions, and we'll do our very best to get to those at the end of the program. We also had a couple super chats that came in yesterday that I missed that I want to make sure we got because they came in after the show. Here, TrueFX says a U.S. attorney was saying that the Ottawa police stealing gas is a war crime as per the Geneva Convention. And so I haven't had a chance to look at that or see who was saying that, what U.S. attorney, or what the basis was for that. But I'm not familiar with the Geneva Convention or international law, in this capacity, right? But it would. It's an interesting question, but that's a great, very generous super chat from TrueFX, and that's what it looks like when it comes up on the screen. And so there's a lot of ways to support the show. You can also become a member on YouTube, very much appreciated. You get a GIF, I think is how you say it. You get a lot of these, including the Freedom Trucker Convoy GIF. We also have a Canada GIF, which is here for the support of the Freedom Trucker Convoy. You get member badges. You can tier up the longer you're a supporter. And we also get YouTube shout outs a couple times a week. Mr. J Bug, Blue Bunny, Ricky Bishop, and Henry Dixon. So you can join by clicking that button right next to the subscribe. And I, of course, very much appreciate it. All right. And so without any further ado, let's get to it. The Ambassador Bridge, yet another port of entry that is now under the microscope of the federal government of Canada. They are having to get their ducks in a row in order to stop all of these trucks in a row. Here's what the scene looked like. This was posted over from Election Wizard on Twitter. We talked about this yesterday. This is a very important bridge. We're going to look at the map here in a minute and break down both sides of this. But this is what it looks like. And it is just entirely basically stagnant. And so this was, I think, from 2 days ago. I'm going to give you a little bit more recent footage, but I just wanted to sort of show you what the stagnation was. Okay, now this is very nearby Ottawa. We're going to take a look at a map, but we're going to learn a little bit more about this bridge that is basically non-functional. My understanding is now there is at least one lane that is open going southbound. So out of Canada into the United States is southbound. We're going to hear from the mayor of Windsor in a minute, but there's nothing that is actually going northbound or into Canada. And so we're going to break this down. Let's take a look at what this bridge is all about. You can see it's a tolled international suspension bridge, and it's pretty cool. It actually was built in 1927. So it's been around for a long time. 92 years ago, 10,000 trucks per day. Okay, 10,000 trucks per day. How many trucks per day did that look like previously? Zero. Zero trucks. So it's not like, 9,000 or 8,000. It is 0 trucks per day. 4,000 autos per day, down to 0. So that is a gigantic problem. The busiest international border crossing in North America in terms of trade volume carries more than 25% of all merchandise trade between the U.S. and Canada. responsible for 150,000 jobs, 13 billion in annual production. Depends on this bridge. 60 to 70% of the commercial truck traffic in the region. Major asset. Now, this is a little bit of a different game, right? Than a bunch of cranky Ottawa city council members complaining about the honking. Psychological warfare, right, is what Mayor Watson said. They're abusing people. People are having to go to the hospital for this stuff. I'm sure it's annoying. I'm sure it's driving people bananas and off the wall, but that's a bunch of upset city council people. This is billions of dollars in trade. And so those phone calls are a little bit different. It's like, yes, Rosie, I know they're still honking. Okay, I get it. We're doing everything we can. Stop it. We're going to stop. All right, stop calling. I got your phone number. I'll call you back. This is different. Somebody says, you know, if this is not opened in one day, I will never support your campaign again, and I'm going to fund your opponent to the tune of $50 million or whatever, right? Big business, big business, billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. Why? Because this is what it looks like. This is the port. You can see this is the geography between the United States and Canada. And so if we are trying to get our bearings straight, here is Ambassador Bridge. You can see it highlighted there in the red pin. And so this area is Michigan, the United States. Here we've got New York. We've got the Great Lakes. And then we have Canada. Now, Ottawa is up this way. I think I have a zoomed out version of this on the next slide. Toronto is here. And so this is the area, this is the region that we're talking about that I'm circling right here, the border between Michigan and Canada. And this is the person who's in charge of Michigan. Look familiar? Oh, it's Gretchen Whitmer, Big Gretch Rona, the alleged kidnapping victim that the FBI set up. Okay, so she's in charge of Michigan. We're going to hear from her because she's getting a little bit agitated as well. Remember that this is goods coming from Canada also back into the United States. And so Big Gretch Rona is going to be upset about this. It's impacting her state as well. We talked about the hierarchy. We've got Premier Doug Ford. He is the sort of the governor, if you know, for U.S. people like myself, right? I think he's sort of analogous to the United States governor, and saying, you know, this is impacting my jurisdiction. We also are going to see this guy. This guy is Drew Dilkens, and so you can see him sort of small down here. He's in charge of he's the mayor of Windsor, which is where a lot of this is coming from. We listened a little bit to him yesterday. And then, of course, we got the Trudeau. And he's the prime minister of the entire country. And so these are the four parties we're seeing. We're also, of course, here in the United States, going to hear from Jen Psaki, who I think is the vice president now, maybe the president. I'm not sure who's in charge, but we're going to hear from her. We've got the Department of Homeland Security. They're issuing warnings because these people are thinking for themselves and doing things that are outside of what is allowable by the government. And so a lot of people are getting angry about this. In fact, so angry that Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford, they issued simultaneous tweets together. Yet, like, within an hour of one another, which means they, coordinated this. They said, what are you going to write in your tweet? And then Ford said, I don't know. What are you going to write in your tweet, Justin? And then Justin said, well, I should probably post mine first, right? Because I'm the leader. So I'm going to post mine first, and then you can post yours second. But it better not be better than my tweet. And it better not get more likes than me. All right, and so here's what they posted together last night after they colluded. They said, Justin Trudeau posted this at 7:47. Says the blockades in Windsor and Ottawa are endangering jobs, impeding trade, threatening the economy, and obstructing our communities. They must stop. Says, I spoke about that with Ford Nation tonight. Our teams will keep working to support Ontarians and get the situation under control. Doug Ford said the same thing. I spoke with the Prime Minister this evening about the ongoing occupations in Ottawa and Windsor. We are going to continue working together to support our forces and the police as they manage these situations. We both agreed this must come to an end. All right. Well, Justin Trudeau's got more tweets, 539 retweets. Now, he's the Prime Minister, so you'd obviously expect that, right? Like, it should be much more. 7,000 likes, so yeah, I don't know. Pretty weak tweets. But Premier Doug Ford did issue this. He called it an illegal occupation, said it was a blockade that's happening in Ontario, says the Ambassador's Bridge is one of the most vital trade corridors in our country. The damage this is causing to our economy, to people's jobs, and their livelihoods is totally unacceptable. We cannot let this continue. And you know what's so fun about these? Is it's like every single one of those statements could be directly applied to the COVID mandates and the COVID policies that have been draconian over the last 2 years. Every time that you can't travel or participate in a job or, drive a truck because of a mandate, yeah, that's causing damage to the economy. It's causing damage to people's jobs. It's causing damage to people's livelihoods. And it is totally acceptable to do that. But it's okay as long as it's them doing it. They don't like it. Said, I spoke to Drew Dilkens, the mayor, and Mayor Mike Bradley, told them we're ready to offer any support we can offer. I don't think they have any support because all the RCMP are going over to Ottawa. Says, I remain confident that our police forces in Ontario, along with the RCMP and the Canadian Border Services Agency, will take appropriate steps to address the evolving situations and bring them to an end. And you're going, I'm not so sure. I'm not that confident about that, Doug Ford. Are you sure you're that confident? I'd like to see you come in and say that with a straight face, because Mayor Jim Watson has been saying that they're getting RCMP people to the tune of 1,800 of them for the last several days, and they haven't been there, have they? And the media is even asking about that. Hey, Jim. Hey, Mayor. Are they coming in? I have the total confidence that the psychological warfare is going to come to an end. All right. And so let's dive in a little bit closer onto this bridge, Ambassador Bridge. You can see when we zoom in here, it is basically the only bridge. Okay, so there isn't anywhere else to go. There is no alternative bridge. You take a look over here. You got Bell Island, the Detroit River. Up here, follow the red line, follow the bouncing ball, everybody. And there's no other bridges that I can identify. There's one. And we also saw that in a previous, here, right? There's not a lot of other areas. Like, that's the narrowest area between these two bodies of water. So there's not much there. And if you take a look at the traffic map over from Google Traffic, right, turn the map layer on, you say, gosh, I wonder how long it's going to take to get over there to Gretchen Whitmer's house and not kidnap her. And then you say, oh, well, that plot is foiled because the truckers are blocking the bridge. Oh, well, guess the FBI agents will have to go back to Langley. All right, and so here you can see the Ambassador Bridge is just totally blocked. And the rest of the city on both sides of the aisle are, of course, as well. And so Drew Dilkens is this guy. You can see him over here on the right. He is now appearing with CPAC. He's talking with Peter Van Dusen to discuss the protest against the vaccine mandate. Here is the full clip, and he is communicating everybody that this is a really pretty catastrophic problem. Let's see.
Well, it is having a huge impact, I can tell you that much. And right now we have northbound lanes open, which means truck traffic from Canada can get across the bridge into the United States. However, it is completely closed in the other direction. So trucks coming from Michigan cannot get into Canada because of the illegal blockade at the Ambassador Bridge. And as you mentioned, this is the busiest border crossing between our two countries, 8,000 to 10,000 trucks a day, over $300 million of goods each and every day. There are a lot of Canadians' livelihoods who rely on smooth and efficient border crossings, no more so than in my own community.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Big deal. Busiest border crossing between Canada and the United States. And so, yeah, the honking is a big problem, obviously. It's terrorizing all those poor Ottawans. But now this is like a big deal. This is going to cause people to lose money. And my goodness, that is not a big, that is a big problem. And so now there's going to have to be a response to that. A couple good super chats came in as this was going on. Dr. EMB says that this area on the Canadian side is known as the Golden Horseshoe Triangle. Lots of auto factories here like Toyota, Ford, etc. And I saw that, and I actually saw that there were a lot of headlines saying that they're going to have to adjust their production, their sort of output because of this, that this is going to impact, right, entire factories and things like that. And so this is where you really start to see, okay, politicians, right, let's see, right, the temperature is rising a little bit. You're going to have a lot more pressure, and it's not going to be, some angry person who's just tired of the horns. It's actually going to be some real consequences. And so you have a couple options here. What are you going to do? We'll find out. We also had somebody else tell me, Rob, shout out to Twitch. Can I please, for the love of all that is heavenly and merciful, can I convince you to say GIF with a G sound, not a J sound, like a GIF? Yes, you have convinced me to do it, and I will work on that and call it a GIF. Hopefully that's right. And so we'll carry on with the show. Thanks for those pauses and those super chats. And let's take a look at what else is happening over at Windsor. This is on the Canadian side of the border, right near the Horseshoe Triangle, which Dr. EMB has educated us about. Here's what it looks like. You can see Charlie Langdon here posted, here in Windsor, Canada, trucker protesters have shut down access to the Ambassador Bridge. They don't want COVID mandates, and they say that they're going to stay until change is made. This was happening bright and early this morning, February 10th, 4:59 a.m. And so let's take a look at this. Looks pretty nice out there.
In Windsor, this is the entrance to the bridge. Obviously, no trucks. In fact, nothing is going over the bridge right now.
Nothing.
Because of the truckers' protest here and the supporters. There's quite a few of them. I even seen a couple of American flags as well. But here they say, leaders don't hide. Typical theme here. But this is in the midst of where the protesters are kind of staging early this morning. And McDonald's, very popular over the bridge. Well, that's closed down because of the truckers, but hey, they've been here for a long time. How long you guys been here? A long time. How long have you guys been here? Couple days, right? 3 days. Beautiful.
Monday.
Canada flags, barbecuing some good food, cold as can be, got some coolers with some good grub in there, and they are just parked up, and looks like a pretty actually nice time. Looks like it'd be a nice time to sit around there, warm up, have some good conversation, and spend some time with some good colleagues talking about liberty and freedom, baby. And so you can see why a lot of people are excited to be there. And so we are going to continue now. There are a couple other sort of angles of this. Herbert Hildebrandt on Twitter said, current view from the bridge in Windsor across the river. Says the busiest border in Detroit blockaded at this hour. And this was, I think, last night. So you can see sort of what the scene looks like. Music, Canadian flag. I'm still waiting for the Nazi flag or the swastika flag. I don't know. Still waiting for it. Hey, there's a United States flag. Oh. Yeah, but I still don't see any Confederate flags. Yeah, so you can see, right, not a lot of activity going back and forth down that area. And so let's take a listen and see what Justin Trudeau had to say about all this, because he did have that conversation with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, and they were talking about this. Now, this is very clever. Now, we've been watching a lot of Justin Trudeau lately, and I don't watch a lot of Justin Trudeau naturally. Okay, we talk a lot about Joe Biden here and Jen Psaki, and we talk about, you know, loser prosecutors all over the country and a lot of other things that just need some attention. But we tend not to talk too much about Trudeau because he's so irrelevant and terrible to listen to. But now I've been paying a lot more attention to him, and I've been trying to understand his technique and figure out how he sort of talks all the time without saying anything. And I noticed this technique, and I noticed this today. This is a very great example of this. He gets asked a question from this reporter, okay, and it's going to be a how question. Now, he's not going to answer a how question. He's going to answer a why question. We talk a lot about this in different contexts, but like in business, it's, you know, what type of conversation are we having right now? You can do this in a relationship, right? What type of conversation are we having right now? Is this a vision conversation? Is this a strategy conversation? Is this an action conversation? Are we talking about like big picture? Are we talking about like, what should we do? Are we like, do we need to do something now, right? Different layers of conversation. And so when you start to categorize conversations in different buckets and label them, you can see that what's happening right here is this woman is asking him a how question. Justin, Prime Minister, you're in charge. How are you going to resolve this? Because there's a bunch of trucks on the bridge. I need to know how, right? She's sort of talking about strategy. And what Justin Trudeau is going to say is, I'm going to answer a why. He's going to take it back up and he's going to talk about vision. She's asking a how, and he's going to answer a why. And once you hear it, you sort of can't unhear it. And so let's listen in. He does this all the time. I noticed that this is the thing that agitates me, because he talks in big vision statements to strategy and technical questions. And here's how that sounds.
How will the border crossings actually be cleared and opened again?
First and foremost, we have to understand that these barricades are unacceptable. They are impacting on regular Canadians, whether it's grocery store prices, whether it's jobs lost and suspended, whether it's supply chains disrupted. This is hurting communities across the country. That's why I've been working closely with municipal leaders, with all of our partners. I had a long conversation with Premier Ford last night. We're going to continue to do what's necessary to end these barricades.
And then he leaves. So if you listen to that again, she asks, how will the blockades end? He says, these are the consequences, and this is the why we need to do this. So he didn't answer anyhow, right? And he pivoted, and it was very formulaic. If you listen to it, it's like a math equation. It's really good. He's good at it. He does it all the time. And that's why I guess people buy his shtick and have continued to buy his shtick, but it's very obvious once you can hear it. It's like he talks in formulas. And a lot of politicians do that. He's good at it. Here, stateside, on the United States, our bureaucrats are also freaking out about this. We've got Governor Whitmer, Big Gretch Rona, over from Michigan here on the stateside, says that the Canadian government and the U.S. need to work towards opening traffic on a key U.S. bridge. Said, quote, the blockade is having a significant impact on Michigan's working families. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Did any of her COVID policies impact Michigan's working families? I don't know. Says they're just trying to do their jobs. Oh, yeah, just like the truckers are. Interesting, curious. Says our communities in automotive and manufacturing and agriculture businesses are feeling the effects. It's hitting paychecks and production lines. That is unacceptable, she said in a statement on Thursday. Said it is imperative that Canadian, local, provincial, and national governments de-escalate this economic blockade. Okay, listen to this language. This is like war. This economic blockade, she said. She added, without suggesting how, of course, because all these people just do is bloviate, says they must take all necessary and appropriate steps to immediately and safely reopen traffic so we can continue growing our economy, supporting good-paying jobs and lowering costs for families. Well, you know, there's only so much you can do about that, Big Gretch Rona, when your party is printing money hand over fist. Did you see inflation up CPI 7.5% today? I posted about that on Telegram, available down in the description below. We also have other people from the U.S. government that are really getting warmed up about this. The Department of Homeland Security has now confirmed that they are monitoring reports of potential truck convoy protest. That's right. The U.S. government, who thinks basically everybody is a terrorist now, has finally confirmed it's tracking potential truck convoys in the U.S. after Canadian protests against the vaccine mandates have already unfolded. The Epic Times sent an email over to an agency spokesperson. They responded. They said, yep, DHS is tracking reports of a potential convoy that may be planning to travel to several U.S. cities. We have not observed, they write, this is DHS, we have not observed specific calls for violence within the U.S. associated with the convoy, and we are working closely with our federal, state, and local partners to continually assess the threat environment and keep our communities safe. DHS is going to continue to share this information timely with the public. And over the past year, DHS has increased actionable intelligence and information with every partner that we have, government and private. And so now we can see DHS is responding to this. We're hearing governors are responding to this. We've had several attorneys general respond to this. I think it was West Virginia. Texas is looking into GoFundMe, right? A lot of U.S. entities are now getting involved. There was even an idea that if people were personally impacted by GoFundMe, you file a complaint against the GoFundMe company, which is located in California. Yeah, weird. And so we're taking a look now, but the White House also needs to weigh in, don't they? And of course, they have. Here is Jen Psaki, and we've missed Jen on this channel. Well, some of us have. And now she's back because we really haven't been talking too much domestic policy. And she's finally weighing in on this, though, now that it might even be crossing into her border. It might be impacting her administration. For example, where the heck is Pete Buttigieg? Is he on maternity leave again?
Thanks, Jen. So truckers in Canada last night shut down the Ambassador Bridge, which carries about a quarter of U.S.-Canada trade in goods. So what's the administration's response to this action, and what steps are being taken to ensure the free flow of goods and also any preventative steps being taken to address a possible blockade on the Michigan side of that bridge?
Well, let me first start by saying I know there's been some suggestion, not by reporters necessarily at all, but that this congestion is related to the vaccine requirements. It's not. I'm saying I'm going to get to the protests, but
what?
The protests going on across Canada, which have spread to a bridge, are leading to sporadic congestion and blockages. I would, just to go back to my point I was trying to make, is that across what we've seen with these requirements is across a range of industries, vaccination requirements have been implemented with no disruptions, have helped increase vaccinations. These requirements help protect more people from COVID, and there's been zero indication across these industries that they would lead to disruptions, including on this policy. We, of course, support, as you know, the right to freedom of speech and protest. But while we do see some of these congestion due to protests, it's clear that these disruptions have broadened in scope beyond the vaccine requirement implementation. Beyond that, we are, of course, in touch with our Canadian counterparts, but I don't have any updates in terms of specific steps.
What is she talking about? What did she just say right there? I have no idea. Something about sporadic contact. It's not actually about the vaccine mandates. It's grown into something bigger than this, right? Do you see what they're doing? They're changing this. They're changing it into something that it's not, right? It's now an economic boycott. It's now an international, highly sophisticated, organized ring of insurrectionists. It's now people that want to overturn the legitimately elected government of their local states and their local provinces and their local federal officials. And this has been the narrative that has been percolating for some time. We've already been seeing this. It's gone from a protest that, according to Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson, should have lasted like 12 hours. That's about as much tolerance as he would allow as a dictator. And so now this is turning into a much bigger deal. In fact, the U.S. government appears to be laying the framework for their own ability to respond. This bulletin came out from our very own Department of Homeland Security, February 7th, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to go through this puppy. Now, on this channel, we've spent a lot of time, I know, talking about DVEs and HVEs, domestic violent extremists and homegrown violent extremists, and racially motivated and ethnically motivated and religiously motivated, and everybody is angry and wants to murder somebody else. Okay, we've got Department of Homeland Security has told us this for a long time, but now they're telling us where they're going to be focusing over the next coming months. And we have an effective date on this puppy, February 7, 2022, all the way up until June 7, 2022. We listened on this channel to the FBI. We listened to the spokesperson for the DOJ forming their own necessary task force at both entities, the DOJ and the FBI, directly dedicated to focusing on domestic terrorism. They announced it. We played it here. It was openly played. They said, we're doing this. Attorney General Merrick Garland signed it all into law, and everybody just kind of looked the other way. Well, now they're modifying that. Here's what this says. A summary of the terrorism threat to the U.S. Homeland Security over the next 6 months. The U.S. remains in a heightened threat environment. Why? It's fueled by several factors. What is the first one? An online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories. Heightened threat fueled by several factors. Online environment filled with false or misleading narratives or conspiracy theories. Okay, well, listen, folks. I have had videos get strikes here on YouTube. I've had videos deleted here on YouTube for these allegations. The Joe Rogan video with the I word got deleted, right? They just define these terms for themselves. Let's see if they're going to tell us what that means. They call it other forms of mis, dis, and malinformation. Now, we have so many forms of problematic information that we have 3 categories, and they actually need to give it an acronym, okay? The MDM. Misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. We used to just have sort of, open speech. But now what you say is going to be categorized into one of these buckets. They say some of this stuff might be introduced by foreign and domestic threat actors. So it's not just Al-Qaeda, it's not just ISIS anymore, it's domestic as well. These threat actors, people who might promote false narratives or conspiracy theories that they define, seek to exacerbate societal friction, to sow discord and to undermine public trust in the government and their institutions to encourage unrest, which could potentially inspire violence. Potentially inspire violence. So you talk about a story that makes somebody mad. It might potentially inspire violence. You're a domestic terrorist. Ipso facto, bingo, bango, bongo, you're done. It continues. Mass casualty attacks and other acts of targeted violence conducted by lone offenders in small groups in furthering personal grievances pose an ongoing threat. While the conditions underlying the heightened threat have not significantly changed over the last year, the convergence of the following factors has increased the volatility, the unpredictability, and the complexity of the threat. So it's sort of the same people that are problematic over the last year, but it's all converging now. And let's take a look at point number one. Number one, what is converging? The proliferation of false or misleading narratives. Okay, the proliferation of false or misleading narratives. So like for example, there are two competing narratives when we're talking about the Freedom Convoy. The Freedom Truckers, from what I can tell, the narrative that I would adhere to is that this has been an entirely peaceful protest, which is rooted in fundamental principles of democracy, where you're allowed to protest and you're allowed to petition your government for a redress of grievances and all of those basic concepts. That's one narrative. The CBC narrative, the Ottawa narrative that Jim Watson and Justin Trudeau are proffering forward, is that this is a bunch of racist, swastika-driven Confederates from the deep south of the United States that are trying to overthrow a legitimately elected government in Canada. So that is another narrative. And so who gets to define these narratives? Well, I guess the government does. And so the proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Well, I mean, I've said for the last year and a month that the FBI is grossly incompetent. I've been making fun of them, saying they play Where's Waldo back there. I got a stinking Lego set up here to mock them for writing that in one of their police report affidavits. Is that sowing discord? Is that undermining public trust in the U.S. government institutions? I've been doing that for 14 months here. All right, so I guess I'm a terrorist. Continued calls for, other problems against churches and all of those things. I guess that of course makes sense. Calls for violence against U.S. critical infrastructure. Yeah, that's maybe what they should be focusing on. Not proliferation of narratives, right? Or misleading narratives. They would say my narrative about the FBI, I'm sure, is false. But I don't think it is. That's my opinion. All right. Number 3, calls by foreign terrorist organizations. Okay, so all of those are fine. Okay, we're good with those. But not number 1, for crying out loud. My goodness. All right, here this continues. Additional details. The primary terrorism-related threat to the U.S. stems from lone offenders or small cells of individuals motivated by a range of domestic grievances, often cultivated by the consumption of certain online content. But we talk about a lot of domestic grievances here. This is basically a domestic grievance show. We're all angry. We all have grievances about domestic issues. And foreign issues too. Include those in the bucket. And we all, consume a lot of online content, I'm sure of it. So these people are ridiculous. The convergence of false or misleading narratives, conspiracy theories have and will continue to contribute to a heightened threat of violence in the United States. What a joke. All right, here are key factors where there may be some false or misleading narratives which undermine public trust in the U.S. government. For example, there's widespread online proliferation of false or misleading narratives about widespread election fraud. Can't talk about that here on YouTube. Or COVID-19. And do you remember all of this, like false misleading narratives? Like, remember when we couldn't talk about the lab leak hypothesis and now it's kind of the thing, the reality? But that, I guess, is all problematic terrorists. So other problems here, you can see COVID-19 restrictions. It says they're splitting this both ways here. As COVID-19 restrictions continue to decrease nationwide, well, people are going to start hanging out again a little bit more, and they're going to get access to certain locations. And if they get access, well, they may commit violence. And also, if they don't get access because of reduced COVID mitigation measure, as a result of reduced COVID mandates, the mitigation measures are going to make them angry and they're going to become extremist and target the government anyway. So they're kind of screwed either way. What are they going to do about this? DHS, FBI, they are going to share information. They're going to communicate these threat briefings to everybody, and they're going to focus on making our community safe. And they're going to need a lot of money to do it. And so they've got $20 million in grants going out in 2021. They got another $77 million in grants. They've got a new, and here's what we talked about, DHS. They have the Office of Intelligence and Analysis. Look, they established a new dedicated domestic terrorism branch to produce sound, timely intelligence needed to counter related threats. Department expanded its evaluation of online activity as part of its effort to assess and prevent acts of violence. Do you see this paragraph? They established a new domestic terrorism branch, domestic, to focus on online activity as part of its efforts to assess violence. What? This is officially from the U.S. government, right? So people are like, gosh, God, it's a good thing we don't live in China. Over there, they have like total, they watch everything you do. They monitor your online activity. Good thing that's not happening here. Oh, it came out on February 7th. That's nice. They wrap it up here. They're working with public and private sectors, probably like all the big tech companies. They're working with private sector partners, including U.S. critical infrastructure owners and others. And so that is now coming to a U.S. Capitol Police building near you. And that's not all. They're also warning about the Super Bowl because they know that people are really going to get mad if this happens. CNN reported that DHS is now warning law enforcement officials that these are going to the Super Bowl, saying that the Ottawa protests might have a problem here. A DHS bulletin was issued on Tuesday. CNN got a copy of it. Agency says, quote, "We have received reports of truck drivers planning to potentially block roads in major metro areas in the United States. And among other things, protest the mandates. Super Bowl scheduled for February 13th. State of the Union is scheduled for March 1st. And so maybe those two dates are problematic. The convoy, it says, will potentially begin in California as early as mid-February and arrive in D.C. as late as mid-March. So there's some rumors that, of course, this is going on. While all this is happening, we need to check in with the truckers. The government has been making a lot of press statements. We've covered a lot of city council meetings. We've listened to Steve Bell, the deputy police chief, and we're learning what's happening over there on Ambassador Bridge. Government is speaking out. We listened to Trudeau, Doug Ford, Dilkens. We listened to Whitmer. We checked in with Psaki. But we got to hear from the truckers. What do the truckers have to say about all this? Well, they posted a press release yesterday, and we're going to go through it in detail. And as we do here, we're going to splice it in with reality. We're going to take a look at what they're saying and go out there and find something that might be supportive of their arguments, just like we've done with some of these other knuckleheads. But I wanted to just put a pin in this comment from this really rude mayor, Jim Watson, out of Ottawa. He was talking about these press conferences in a very pejorative manner. He was saying that they were like out of a Monty Python script or something like that. And you know what? I disagree with him. I think it looks pretty good. But let's just rub his nose in this for one quick second.
So, Kim, do you want to just confirm what you just sent me with respect to the decision just a few moments ago about the fines?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I just received confirmation that the Regional Senior Justice of the Ontario Court of Justice has increased the following fines to their...
That's not the clip. I got the wrong clip. Anyways, yesterday he said something like, it's what do they want to have a conversation with us. They want to come talk to me. They want to sit down with us in their press conferences when they're looking like this, and it was very rude. And so I wanted to just make note here that is what they are using. They're taking a look at this type of setup, and they're saying that is offensive to them. Okay, I don't know if you remember. I wish I kind of botched that. I wish I had the clip, but it was a very rude clip, and he was saying that it was condescending as hell. This is why we're not going to talk to you. Anyway, so this was posted this morning, February 10th, premiered this morning by Marcel Ernie. Okay, so make sure you go and give his channel a follow. He's been doing a lot of stuff with the Freedom Convoy, and so please go back over there. What I did is I downloaded the video, I adjusted the audio, I cleaned up some of the echo, I denoised it, and I added some subtitles so we could hear it a little bit better, because earlier in the week we had an audio problem and that didn't work out too well. And so several of you sent me some guides. One of you in particular sent me a very helpful do-it-yourself guide where you actually recorded a video. Thank you for that. I'm going to respond, but I just have not done that yet. But anyways, this is the Freedom Convoy Truckers now, who are going to be responding to the entire chorus of government bureaucrats who thus far have really refused to meet with them, as he's going to explain. And so he's going to start by catching us up with Justice McLean, one of the judges that listened to their injunction case earlier on in the week. Let's listen in.
Good evening, and thank you for attending from all around the world, all around Canada, all around Ontario, and all around Ottawa. This week, Justice McLean presided over a matter before him in the court regarding to many of the activities of the protesters. And he reaffirmed in his courtroom that we have a constitutional right to be here, to do this protest.
Right on.
We recognize there is a significant amount of pressure on city officials. Our issues are not with the city of Ottawa. Our issues are not with the city residents. Our issues are with the federal government, in particular, the Liberal Party of Canada, who have formed a government. That is who our issues are with. We have a legal right to be here as Canadian citizens. We are exercising that legal right to do so.
So pretty clear, we are listening to the judges. We think we have a full, and we do, according to the courts, have a full lawful authority to be here right where we're at. We heard previously on the show, we talked about the injunction. There was a private attorney who was representing a woman named, I can't remember her name at the moment, but they got an injunction about the honking of the horns, and there must have been some conversation back and forth about what this judge's perspective was. And remember, they came to an agreement. They were only going to honk between certain hours, and so they were actually negotiating. And this was that same comment that Bev Johnson gave from City Council earlier on in the week. She said, you know, when they did have an opportunity to talk, it all kind of worked out. Has anybody thought about doing that with them? And so we're going to continue on with this. And let's listen to the truckers. You know, what is their end goal here? What do they want out of this? You know, we've all said it's about the mandates. Here's what it sounds like from one of their representatives' own words.
I've been working very hard to work with the city officials to relieve some of the pressure on the city managers, the law enforcement, and the residents themselves. We have shoveled snow. We have cleaned garbage. We have fed the homeless.
We've played it
We
here.
have helped out in medical emergencies. We have done everything within our power to support the people of Ottawa and to find a way to get our message across while still remaining relevant in putting pressure where pressure is due on the federal government. We have no interest in federal politics. We have one mission, and that is to end the mandates and to stop this from happening again.
Yes.
We do not have any interest in meddling in internal political strife. We have no interest in meddling in the mechanisms of government. We just want to end the COVID-19 vaccine passports, the masks, the mandates. We want the laws to be reaffirmed.
Yep, and it's pretty clear, right? Two things: making sure the mandates end and that it never happens again. And that's something that I've said here, you know, on this channel. Like somebody asked a couple shows ago, what would your question be to Rand Paul? You know, I got an opportunity to ask him a question. That was my question. When you take over, how are you going to make sure this literally never happens again? When the balance of power switches, how are you going to preserve liberty so that the next time there's an emergency, the bureaucrats don't use it as a lever to abscond people's rights? And so it's a great question. It's a great point. And it sounds like people in Canada are actually sort of coming around to this, or at least coming around to the idea of the mandates going bye-bye. We talked about this yesterday. There were two liberal Canadian politicians who were sort of, waffling on this. And today now we get a new update over from the Post Millennial. They tell us that this politician, this guy, his name is Pierre Poilievre, I think, tells Trudeau the rest of the world is moving on from COVID while you're just hunkering down. Why are you doing that? He said one person is responsible for this whole mess, and that's the Prime Minister. And so this article came in, said that he was on the floor, actually, getting into it. On Wednesday, let's just listen to him. Here's what he said.
I'm vaccinated, and I encourage others to do so. But every person has their story. They have their reasons. They might be medical reasons, cultural reasons. They might even have had an unfortunate medical experience with prior medical prescriptions that have prevented them from making that decision. But that decision must be theirs. Their bodies belong to them. They are masters of their own decisions. And instead of listening to these people, the Prime Minister has insulted them and name-called them and left them with no choice but to engage in legitimate and peaceful protest. If he wants to put an end to those protests, if he wants to actually reunite the country, then he should do what others have begun doing, because freedom is on the march in this country.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Saskatchewan, Alberta, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec are beginning to lift these restrictions at midnight in Alberta.
So why don't the other people lift them, right? Why doesn't the Prime Minister Trudeau and Doug Ford from Ontario just say, okay, we're going to do what our neighbors are doing, enough already? Is it about that? Or is it about control? Is it about sort of winning a political argument? Is it about supporting a bunch of people that are perpetual COVID pandemic, Looney Tunes? And did you hear what Pierre just said previously? He talked about not willing to meet with them. Let's listen to this trucker. This guy is telling specifically, I begged to meet with them. I've been trying to meet with people from this city, from this government for days. But they're not cooperating.
Okay, we have worked tirelessly to communicate that goal. At some levels of government, that doesn't seem to be penetrating. Okay, it's very frustrating. 2 days ago, I did an address very similar to this, and I begged for somebody from the city of Ottawa to sit at a table with me at noon 2 days ago. It's now Wednesday night, and I'm doing another address like this, and I am doing everything in my power to work with the city of Ottawa to relieve the pressure on them. But it would appear that that has not been very fruitful. It would appear that certain members of the Ottawa Council
Carol Ann
are trying to use this Freedom Convoy 2022 to further their own careers.
Diane Deans.
And to continue to put pressure on law enforcement.
Jim Watson.
To escalate use of force, not de-escalate it. We are a peaceful protest.
We are a peaceful protest. And he said specifically, we begged to meet with them, right? We've been wanting to meet with them. We had multiple opportunities to do it. Just want to have a conversation to resolve this. But there are other people on the city council that wants this to escalate. And we've talked about that. Do you remember this clip from Carol Ann Meehan, the Meehan meltdown, where she was begging the police to help? We're so scared. Come help us. Here is what she said. We just heard from the liaison to the government themselves saying, hey, we want peaceful dialogue. That's his message. Let's listen to the opposite message. What does the government sound like? You just heard the Freedom Convoy liaison. Let's listen to the government liaison. What are they saying about this?
Respectfully suggest that bylaw is being way too pussyfooted around the trucks that are downtown. Waiting to start investigating who owns the trucks, you're just wasting time. Councillor Fleury suggested that we ticket anyway. I think we go ahead, we ticket anyway. You send those tickets, one a day for a maximum amount, to the owner of that transport truck. Don't waste time. Don't,
no due process.
Let's not be as nice as you want, as we obviously have been.
Yeah.
We got to do what's necessary. And that's just ticket away. Ticket, send it by mail. You don't have any confrontation with the truckers who are causing all the trouble. And not only that, get the license plates of all those trucks that are running through the neighborhoods and do the same damn thing. Okay. Here's my motion.
Yeah, so do the same damn thing. I'm so mad. Ticket everybody. Go after their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers. Go and after everybody and just ticket all of them. And if you think that we should have restraint, well, I might suggest you're just pussyfooting around this whole issue. All right. Is that Canadian? I don't know. And so that's not what she is. That's not it. There's a lot more from Meltdown Carol-Ann Meehan. Here's what she had to say.
I'd also like to ask if we have given the protesters a deadline, a firm deadline, that they must be leaving the city by noon Tuesday or 6 o'clock on Wednesday, or something's going to happen. We
like
could
what?
fill the Armory building next to City Hall with geared up riot police. Just have them sit there. They don't have to do anything. It's maybe the suggestion of a threat, which is what Premier Legault has been doing, that actually gets something working. It gets something going. Give them a deadline. See who leaves, and the people who don't leave.
What?
Do something.
Do something.
I'm clearly frustrated along with everybody. But I think the time for being nice has passed.
The time for being nice has passed. What a psycho! God, somebody needs to do something. Just, did you see her body language? Man, I wish that was HD, because she had that murderous rage going. Like, she's like, oh God, it's a good thing she didn't have a firearm in her hand right there and a bunch of truckers. What a psychopath. She's on the city council there. And so, oh my goodness, you heard what the truckers had to say about this. You heard what their approach was. We'd love to talk to you. We're helping shoveling snow. We've played footage of them shoveling snow off the War Memorial, for crying out loud. But not them. She wants men and women in armored gear outside the armory, ready to go. All right, so here is the response to here's more of the press conference from trucker team.
I invite the federal government to sit at a table and let's find a way to resolve this. I will not allow this to be derailed by insignificant politicians at this local level who have aspirations of greatness. We are aware that there is a process center that has been set up in the city with fingerprinting equipment, camera equipment, and it's a facility meant to process arrested truckers. We are prepared for this. If we are arrested, we will be taken into custody peacefully. We will not resist. Okay? We have a team of pro bono lawyers here in Ottawa who have set up an entire clinic to help our drivers deal with all the nuisance tickets that we're getting, all the ridiculous nickel and dime issues that we've been dealing with, in order to put pressure and annoyance onto the truckers. For those of you who are at home and you feel that this is much more than what it really appears to be, it is not. We are here for one thing and one thing only. And that is just to end the mandates.
All right. So he is talking about them actually setting up a processing center. They are, reorganizing. They're bringing all those 1,800 RCMP agents in, and they're going to be focused on processing tickets. Okay, we've talked about this. The city council raised a bunch of citations up from $100 to $1,000, $350 to $1,000, and the list goes on and on and on. And so I've handled a lot of civil traffic tickets, a lot more criminal traffic tickets, and practiced in probably over 120 courts in the state of Arizona. I'm not licensed in Canada. I'm licensed in California, but there's a lot of principles about traffic ticket defense and criminal defense in general that are very, very interesting to think about. And so when the government comes out and they say, we're going to start ticketing people and we're going to start, citing them, and Meltdown Meehan is going to be, demanding blood on the streets, we got to think about it practically. What type of resources does the government need to bring to bear in order to wage a successful legal campaign against the truckers? And so there's a couple different ways that we can take a look at this and splice it. But the first thing I wanted to look at was their funds, right? How much money do they have? And what kind of war chest is that going to build them from a defense perspective, right? A criminal defense or a civil defense? What type of war chest do they have? And so I wanted to find what the Give, Send, Go amount was up to earlier today. And I went over to Google to try to plug it in there. And guess what? They don't even show it on the front page. Isn't this amazing? You go to Google and you type Give, Send, Go Freedom Convoy because you want to get to the actual page. It's 4 block of newses. We have Twitter reports, and then they give you a TechCrunch article. If you go over to Bing and type Freedom Convoy, right, Give, Send, Go Freedom Convoy, and even spell it wrong, the first link sends you to the actual donation page. Isn't that amazing? First link. So it's, and I even spelt it wrong on Bing, for crying out loud. I mean, I know everybody knows that Google is corrupt as heck, but when I see stuff like this, it's like, wow, it's like they're not even trying to hide it. It's shocking. Anyway, so if you go over to the Give, Send, Go page, then what you can see is they've got a target donation of $16 million, and here they've raised 8.2 million of that. So my friends, that is a war chest, right? That is a lot of money there. And so they're going to be, and that's of course not, stopping anytime soon. And so if you just think about this on a practical level, let's break this down just mathematically. If we've got $8.2 million and we've got $1,000 fines, and we do the math, 8.2 million divided by $1,000 fines divided by 500, let's say trucks or truckers, that means that there's enough funds in the reserve to basically fund all 500 trucks, right? So for the different vehicles, I've heard estimates that there's, let's say 450, I think was the last estimate, that there were that many different vehicles out there. So let's say they cite every single of the 450 trucks. There's enough money there to pay for traffic tickets for every single one of those 500 trucks for 16 days, right? That's presuming, let's say, that every single day, every single truck gets a new ticket, which I think might be a little bit difficult to do. So you can see, right, a lot there. And that's not all going to be tapped. And so let's talk about some common traffic court defense strategies. Now, I'm going to run through these relatively quickly. And this is going to be some heavy lifting legally. But let's just say that, let's put this in sort of a first-person perspective. If you got a criminal or a civil traffic ticket, these might be some problems that will pop up. Okay, number one, you could have a facial insufficiency. You could have a problem on the front of the ticket. So you get a ticket for speeding. The citation says it's missing something. It's missing something very important. It's like missing a citation number. It's missing a last name. Sometimes what will happen is an officer will mix up somebody's name, or they'll forget something that's pretty critical. And if they miss something critical, before the ticket even gets filed with the court, you may have an opportunity, you may have an ability to challenge that ticket. Okay, so challenge it before it goes into court because it's facially insufficient. We also have an incorrect statute, so they could cite you under the wrong code. They could also file it in the wrong court, put it in a wrong jurisdiction. They could not properly identify somebody. So let's think about this, okay? This is actually a relatively common one, failure to identify. So they could file it in the wrong court. They could put the wrong citation statute on there, all of that. But what often happens in traffic ticket cases is when a police officer comes into court to testify, they won't make a connection between the person they cited and the violation that they saw. Right? So what this will mean is the officer will come into court and he'll say, Judge, I saw the defendant do X, Y, and Z, right? They sped, they weaved within the lanes. They made a wide right turn. They committed all sorts of problems. And you say, that's great. And they're telling this whole story about a person that committed all these violations. And as a defense lawyer, you just sit there and you say, well, that's neat that they talked about that person. I don't know who that person was. They never stated in their entire testimony that that was my client. They didn't identify my client. They didn't say, oh, well, the photo matches the driver and this person did it. So they were talking about the defendant. They were talking about some mythical person in their imagination, but they didn't identify somebody. Right? And they need to come and testify, and they need to say, I checked their ID and that person matches the person on the citation and I witnessed them commit this violation. And so if they can't do that, or if they even fail to testify about that, that could be a problem. You can also have a statute of limitations issue. So if they don't file the complaint soon enough after they give you the ticket, they may run out of time. You could have a speedy trial problem right after you got the ticket. You demand you have a trial, you demand that you have a hearing, they don't bring it in time. If you actually go to the hearing, what happens if the officer doesn't show up? Okay, this actually happens. It actually does. Don't need a lawyer to win those cases. If the officer doesn't show up and it's a civil hearing and there's nobody to testify against somebody, and let's say there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases, and officers have to be in multiple locations at the same time, well, maybe they can't attend them all. You also have hearing preparedness. What happens if you schedule a trial and the officer doesn't bring the evidence? Well, maybe he's reprimanded. He can also show up. You can negotiate fines down. You could have a directed verdict if the officer testifies inappropriately. You could have an officer who, you get the radar calibrations precluded or some sort of evidence precluded. Here, this directed verdict one is there's an example of one example would be like if you're driving on a road and an officer comes in to testify against you and he says your client was speeding, and he was speeding and he was going 85 miles per hour. And you go, okay, well, whatever. Well, what was the posted speed limit? What if he didn't say what the posted speed limit was? Then he didn't establish the elements of the offense. And so officers sometimes, they just get confused. They're testifying and they just miss stuff. And so that's what defense attorneys are looking at. We also have, of course, constitutional objections, politically motivated penalties. I think these new fines are sort of pseudo ex post facto violations, and there's all sorts of constitutional problems there. So the point of going through all that, I know that was a lot, but it is to show you that even if they went out and they ticketed every single trucker every single day for the next 16 days, you could have lawyers splicing and dicing every single one of those defenses into every single step of every citation that goes through the court. Defenses before the ticket's filed, defenses while the ticket is being processed, defenses about the ticket, defenses about how the ticket is being processed itself. And so, my goodness, they're talking about just a major, major problem here. We see these types of things pop up when we have big events here. So like this weekend in Arizona, we have the Waste Management Open, one of the biggest golf events ever, right? And we're going to get a bunch of people charged with disorderly conduct and criminal damage and urinating in public and littering and consuming in public and criminal trespass, and the list goes on and on and on. And so we're going to get a big bunch of these cases come through. And so we're going to see prosecutors and government officials, they've got some incentive to make some of these minor cases go away a little bit more quickly because they're too overwhelmed. They can't even get enough agents out there to patrol the physical streets. Do you think they have enough prosecutors to prosecute all those cases? Do you think they have enough judges to hear all those cases and enough calendars? I'm not sure they do. And so let's listen back into the truckers. He goes back to the law and says that they do have a right to be here.
Justice McLean has told you loud and clear. He has reaffirmed you loud and clear. We have a right to be here. A right to be heard, a right to protest. That is what we are here to do. We are prepared to be arrested peacefully. We have legal representation already prepared. We know that the Canadian Armed Forces are doing their staff checks right now. We know other police forces all across Ontario are being asked to get involved. We also know that retired members of the military, active members of the military, retired members of all levels of law enforcement, active members of law enforcement want no part of this. They think it's morally wrong. It's not.
Yeah, and we talked about that earlier on in this week. There was that officer that we listened to who communicated that, said that I'm resigning. Basically, what I'm seeing my fellow officers do is completely inappropriate. I want no part of it, and I'm leaving. Now, here is this trucker who's saying, we are not leaving, and that's my final answer. And if you don't understand that, get somebody in the room who does. Here's how that sounds.
We are not afraid of members of the Canadian Armed Forces coming here. This is a peaceful protest. We have no fear here. We are prepared. We're highly motivated because we can't go home. We cannot go home. We cannot abandon our families. We cannot abandon our communities. Everybody here in this convoy is here for their children. That's why we're here. And if you can't understand that, I'm sorry. Get somebody in a room with me who does.
Like, hear that side, Justin Trudeau? No, not going to be Justin. This is the final clip of this press conference where he's saying, pray for us. Let's listen to this, and then we'll check back in with the media.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for all the food, the fuel, the financial support to the truckers. Thank you for the letters. Keep doing videos.
We will.
Keep reaching out. Keep sending your love. Pray for us to be resolved. Pray for us to make good decisions. If there are any questions, I'll take those now.
All right. And so it goes on into questions. If you want to watch the full thing, I have the link to where to find the rest of it down in the slides, which is available, if you're a member, at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And so check that out if you want to follow the rest of it. There is also a lot of hyperventilating in the media as this continues to heat up. And as it moves into the United States, we're seeing a lot of more meltdowns from all over the news channels. Benny Johnson is sharing this from Tom Elliott on Twitter. You can see corporate media in meltdown mode. Let's listen in.
Sedition, insurrection, a threat to democracy.
This city is under siege. They are now calling it an occupation.
Alarming situation there in Ottawa.
The police chief is calling it a nationwide insurrection driven by madness.
This is kind of our insurrection by air horn moment. I think it's part of the globalization of Trumpism.
Canadians know where I stand.
There hasn't been as much violence as some had perhaps projected, but that does not necessarily mean that it has been peaceful.
Reports of severe vandalism and criminal behavior.
Streets are clogged. The honking is incessant and deafening.
This pandemic has sucked for all Canadians.
Residents that I have spoken to who say they feel terrorized, intimidated.
Residents say they feel like hostages.
Residents in that area say that they are being held hostage, that this freedom convoy, as they call it, has essentially imposed a lockdown on them.
Some protesters harassed a soup kitchen.
These anti-vaxxers actually took food from the mouths of the homeless.
Hungry, yeah.
Because they're so put upon.
There have not been any violent outbursts. However, horns have been honking for 12 to 21 hours a night.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
Many of them are holding Confederate flags.
I've heard there's QAnon supporters in the crowd.
We've seen swastikas. We've seen the Confederate flag. We've seen flags with Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, in a noose. Lots of Donald Trump flags as well. People chanting, "Let's go, Brandon."
It is actually one of the rare times in history you're going to see swastikas and yellow stars at the same protest.
A few people shouting and waving swastikas does not define who Canadians are.
Ottawa is being besieged by a group of anti-do-anything-about-COVID truckers called the Freedom Convoy. A so-called Freedom Convoy.
So-called Freedom Convoy of Truckers. It's a cult.
Yes, it is. We've heard it called a nationwide insurrection.
A threat to democracy, an insurrection, sedition.
This is a moment for responsible leaders to think carefully about where they stand and who they stand with.
Gravy, and go check them out, of course. What a great montage, my goodness. And did you see there? That was Joe and Mika Brzezinski. They look like a happy couple up there talking about the cult truckers. Now, I'm sure that they're happily married at home. Yeah. So they said a lot of stuff there, right? Swastikas and racist and Confederate flags and the whole thing. It's very curious because we have been paying attention to some other people on YouTube, live streaming, walking around, actually talking with people and meeting with people. And one of those people happens to be our good friend, Viva Fry, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, right next door at vivabarneslaw.locals.com and at YouTube tagged in the description below. Here, Viva is on Breitbart News. Exclusive video. Exclusive Viva. And so we're going to, of course, clip this. Canadian YouTuber Viva Fry, Legacy Media, says are outright lying about the Freedom Convoy. And they've got, Breitbart now has somebody who is embedded there on the scene. This guy is named Robert Kraychik. And so give him a follow. I'm only going to play sort of a first part of this, but it's good to listen to the Viva is getting interviewed. Viva is normally man on the streets doing the interviewing. Viva is now being a man on the streets being interviewed. Let's listen to how that sounds. And juxtapose this with the montage we just heard, okay? Bunch of hyperventilators here in the United States mainstream media saying basically the same thing, right? They're all copy and pasters. That's all they do. Just read the highlights, the bullet points that are distributed. Viva's been on the streets for like 6-7 hours a day or however long he's been out there, maybe longer. I don't know. This is what his report sounds like.
I'm here with Viva Frey, and I just want to ask you, what is it you think Breitbart News audience needs to know about what's going on here in Ottawa and in capitals across the provinces of this great country?
The first thing you need to know is that I will call it the legacy media of Canada is outright lying. The politicians are outright lying. They're banking on the fact that a majority of the people are getting their news from the same outlets that they pay to lie. And you need to know what's going on. If you believe what you were told, you would not feel safe walking here, and you would think that something is going on here that is not going on here. So you need to know that. This, as far as I've seen, other than people crying with joy, and I'm not saying this, you can go watch my streams, literally crying with joy. Other people are crying from tragedy that they've gone through over the last 2 years. People are saying that the face muscles hurt from smiling so much, and that they haven't smiled so much in 2 years, that they haven't been this proud to be Canadian in 2 years, and that they haven't felt this level of patriotism in 2 years. So if you can get down here to see it, even if you don't agree with it, get down to see it so you can come to your own conclusions in person. And if you support it, get down and support it peacefully so that politicians can hear what the people have to say. But it's truly an amazing movement to see because it's not just local, it's spreading internationally, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that because it is spreading around. I saw that there was a big raid that took place in New Zealand and other places. And so Viva, obviously, look, he must be a terrorist because he's not saying what the government says. So, look, it's exactly right. It's exactly what we've seen. I followed several different live streamers. Many of you have watched probably a lot more than I have of Viva and others. And his report has been the accurate report from what I have been able to see, right? Unless Viva's just like, is he walking around all of the Nazi camps that are set up there? Are all of these live streamers just like intentionally avoiding the death camps where the Klan is set up? I don't know, but I haven't seen it, and I don't think anybody else has either. Yeah. And so we've got a couple other clips. This is what we do see instead. This is, agitating Justin Trudeau. These are people screaming at Justin or talking about Justin to Fox News. Let's listen how this sounds.
Hey, oh, Justin Trudeau's not
Now, I don't see any Nazi flags. I see a rainbow flag. I saw a rainbow flag there, but I didn't see any Nazi flags. I saw Canadian flags and some rainbow flag and a rainbow flag, but no Nazis, no Confederates. And that's curious because, that's what we've been told for a long time. There was another person, this woman named Rupa Subramanya is over on Substack, and she is writing for Barry Weiss's blog. And she was able to spend some time with the truckers. She wrote an article saying what the truckers want. I've spoken to 100 of the protesters gathered in the Canadian capital. What's happening is far bigger than the vaccine mandates, she says. Rupa lives in downtown Ottawa, within the view of Parliament Hill, says she spent the past 10 days or so bundled up, walking around the protest, spoken to over 100 protesters, truckers, and other folks, and not one of them sounded like an insurrectionist, a white supremacist, a racist, or a misogynist. Oh. And I think, folks, that she's qualified because she is not a white male, right? Which is a good thing, I think, because she can comment on that stuff. If you're a white person, you can't say that. If you say that there's no racist people out there, they just say that you are a part of it. It's all complicated, I'm not sure. But she continues to write. She says, they sound like Ivan. Ivan's 46 years old. He immigrated with his wife, Tatiana, from Ukraine. Says, we came to Canada to be free, not slaves. We lived under communism, and in Canada, we're now fighting for our freedom. Like so many truckers, Ivan refused to share his last name. Another person named BJ Dichter, a spokesman for the Freedom Convoy, is vaccinated. He estimates that many, maybe most of the truckers are at the protest too, are vaccinated. Says, I'm Jewish. I have a family in mass graves in Europe, and apparently I'm a white supremacist. Well, welcome to the club, BJ. He told me on Wednesday. Ostensibly, the truckers are against the new rule mandating that when they re-enter Canada from the U.S., they have to be vaccinated. She says, but that's not really just it. The mandate is a moot point. The Americans have a similar requirement, and anyway, the vast majority of the truckers are already vaccinated. So what do they want then? What is the deal? She says it's about something else, or many things. A sense that things will never go back to normal. A sense that they are being ganged up on by the government, the media, big tech, and big pharma. One thing was indisputable, she writes. There was this electricity coursing through the streets, and it felt like it could get out of control. It didn't help when a handful of protesters sported swastikas or Confederate flags, she writes. Or when GoFundMe shut down the page and went over to established charities. Says it's hard to capture how thoroughly Trudeau has misjudged this moment. This pandemic, he said, has sucked for all Canadians. But as for this protest, it has to stop. Rupa writes, if he sauntered down to the mess of rigs on Wellington Street across from the Parliament building, opposite the mall and the War Memorial, if he talked to these people for just a few minutes, he would understand. It will not stop. What's happening in Canada right now is bigger than the mandates. What's happening in Canada right now is bigger than the mandates, she writes. She spent 10 days, talked to over 100 of them, sharing her perspective. Not a misogynist, not an insurrectionist, not a racist in sight. And, you know, if there were, right, if there were a bunch of racists everywhere, like at their Klan meetings, she was obviously a non-white male. So all the neo-Nazis at their Klan camp, probably, she didn't see that anywhere. So Viva wasn't missing stuff. She also missed it too, I guess. The post-millennial is saying that they are hardened indeed. And as Rupa wrote, they are not leaving. Canadian protesters declare they may take our jerrys, but they'll never take our freedom, after walking past several police officers with jerry cans in tow. Let's watch. Walking right by them. Bye. Bye. Bye.
They may take our jerrys, but they'll never take our freedom! Freedom!
Okay, so like it's kind of hard to stop that if that continues to happen. Here's another guy. This one was, I think, earlier this morning. Freedom Convoy supporter hauls jerry cans with a sign saying when the protesters are leaving. Here's when the protesters are leaving. Oh, they're not. Oh, they're not leaving. Oh, peace, brother. Peace. All right, and so here is yet another one. The Freedom Convoy Truckers, and they make music together by revving engines and banging jerry cans. All right, and so you can see they are pretty much stocked up, and I think we've got one more before we close it up and we jump into some questions and some super chats from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com and on YouTube. Well, I got one final clip. Was that a terrorist song? I think it was beautiful, but I don't know, who knows? That is what we've been seeing. A lot of love and joy and singing and cheer and liberty and freedom and peace, but not what the media has been seeing. Let's see what you have to say about all this and more over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com and some of the super chats that came in on YouTube. And so let me do a refresh over here. I saw somebody sent in one very recently saying that just announced, Tillman Warren says, just announced for suspended of the Give, Send, Go monies. So let's take a quick look at this. Saw that on Citizen Free Press. All right, so Citizen Free Press is here. Doug Ford strikes again. Ontario government freezes Give, Send, Go money to the truckers. Let's see if there's more story on this. Continue reading here. All right, Brian Lilly on Twitter is saying this. Let's check this out. Breaking, Ford government has gone to court to freeze the funds of the Freedom Convoy. Order was issued by the court today and all funds are frozen until further notice. Wow. Okay. Today, statement from the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, says today the Attorney General brought an application in the Superior Court for an order pursuant to the section of the Criminal Code prohibiting the disposing of any money to criminals. Afternoon, the order was issued. It binds any and all parties in possession. So a court order now. Wow. That's Doug Ford. And so the cat and mouse game continues. They're going to take those funds, and I guess they're probably going to have to refund those funds or do something with them. But the funding will continue until freedom improves, I imagine. And I see somebody in the chat is already saying they're setting up some crypto funds. Of course, crypto is going to be the ultimate solution to all of these dictators, right? This is what they want to do with everything. They want to shut off your passport, your vaccine passport. They want to shut off everything. Your bank accounts, total control. Your social credit score goes down, literally already a thing in China. Just shut you off, right? Tons of power. Crypto scares the hell out of them because it really makes it difficult for them to do that in many, many ways. And so the cat and mouse game continues, and we'll continue to follow it along. Thank you for that update, though, from Tillman Warren. And you can see, right, These people, they'll go to any lengths possible to try to stop this movement, but they will not even sit down and talk with them. It's pretty disgusting. I mean, they should really be ashamed of themselves. These are their own citizens. But they don't care too much about any of that. We had a couple super chats come in at the very start of the show. TrueFX was there yesterday. We got that one at the start of the show. TrueFX, one more time, thank you for sending that in. And was talking about the Geneva Convention. Ray K says, Gandhi said protests must be disruptive. Time to listen to the people who believe the science that has never changed, from Ray K. Jay says the government describes itself in that doc. Unless they would like to argue how they do not represent the people, sounds like an attorney's unicorn case. From Dr. EMB says, I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Be a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper. From Dr. EMB. Thank you, Doctor. Kareem became a member. Wolfgang Deo says, Canada, Canada, Canada. Blame California. Midas Whale says Ottawa. The Ontario government says it successfully petitioned a court to freeze millions of dollars in funds on Give, Send, Go. Yeah, let's check that out again. So let's see. Is this trending on anything? No, it's not. I actually created a list on Twitter for just the convoy. And let's see if there's any good activity there. I'll pull that up here quickly, because there's a lot of government officials all weighing in on this. Yeah, so Ottawa Citizen is reporting that Ottawa and Windsor MPPs demand a recall of the legislature to deal with worsening protest. So they're trying to just recall people who are in government, dealing with the high cost of caregiving. Bill Blair says, we've approved a request for the Canadian Forces. Okay, so you can see a lot of stuff going on over there. Let's go back to some of these comments. We have Midas Whale, got that one. John says, shout out to Twitch. Yeah, and can I convince you to say GIF? Yes, I saw somebody else in the chat. They said that it's graphical interface format, which I will always say GIF now because it's short for graphic. Oh. I might have known that, though. Somebody else might have educated me about that. Who knows? I'll probably forget. Jonah Ryan says, Ambassador reruns north into USA. Janet Hunt says, as a trucker, this movement makes me so proud. We can go without to prove a point. From Janet Hunt. She's a trucker. Shout out, Janet. Honk, honk to you. Thanks for being here. Wolfgang Deo says, I don't think trucks can make the Windsor Tunnel. I don't know about that at all. Probably not. Dr. EMB. No. Where was that one? Jeremy Treguna says, the irony that the lockdowns and illegal occupations are basically the same thing from different vantage points. So when the PM et al. Call them terrorists, I think, Pot, have you met Kettle? Yeah, it's a great question, right? They're so mad that they can't go to work, that they can't go outside, that, that they have to get jeered at. But they're okay doing it in reverse. As long as they're in charge, as long as they're the winning team, they're okay with doing it. Jonah Ryan says there's a tunnel in Windsor and a Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia, both blocked. Dr. EMB says this area known as the Golden Horseshoe Triangle, lots of factories there. From the good Dr. EMB in the house. Jay says, you are aware that all the trucker protests are going to be used as a government reason for shortages and inflation, right? Will it work? Well, look, I think we've already got max inflation. Look, they're going to start raising rates. I think they've already indicated as much aggressively now is some of the concern. I posted about that on the new Telegram down in the description below. But there is a lot of, right, anytime there's a crisis, you take full advantage of it. January 6th, it was a problem. Guess what happened? We've had a year and ongoing. It's going to be 2 years. It's going to be 4 years of beating this to death. So yes, the Canadian politicians are going to do the same thing. They're going to say, oh, look what they've done. They're ruining everything. This is leading to inflation and shortages, and blame our political opponents. Don't blame us. We could solve the whole thing by just lifting the mandates. Of course, we're not going to do that. We would rather take people's funds, $9 million away from them. You can see that's their tactic. Stephanie Womax became a member. Shout out. Welcome, Stephanie. Danimal Cracker says, Robert, there's a lot of chatter about a convoy heading to shut down the Peace Bridge between Fort Erie, Ontario and Buffalo, New York on Saturday. Huge if true. Yeah, look, all these ports of entry. What if the trade stops between two major powers? Woo! Dr. EMB says, yes, I stand corrected. Not immediately on the other side of the Ambassador Bridge. I meant to say this area near to Toronto, lots and lots of industry, Toyota, Ford, etc., who receive and send auto parts, etc., to and fro. From Dr. EMB. Look, doctor, I don't know anything about Canadian geography. Everybody in the chat on all three of them are just skewering me on the geography. I'm okay with that. No problem on that. That's cool. I don't know Canada. I've been to Quebec. That's it. But I'm learning a lot about it. And it is a very interesting country. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people I'd like to go hang out with up there now that I'm learning more about them. And so we'll see what these convoys go. You know, maybe that's in the future. We'll see. Thank you, Dr. EMB. Diane McNamara says, what's Trudeau's out? Can a court force his hand? Afraid military is next when it comes to blocking bridges. He's made money on the 300 million doses he's ordered. Is it about money? Look, I don't know what it is about from his perspective. It's probably ego. It's probably, a domino effect. If he feels like he loses this, right, it might be his political career. I mean, I don't know how the Canadian population would see that, but if he bends on this, right, if he loses this, if he says, okay, the mandates come off, they might say, you're an ineffective leader. You can't handle this type of crisis, right? Well, you're weak and you're no longer prime minister. And so he's got no obligation to, well, he has to continue going that direction, because if he doesn't, he's going to look weak. It's a good question. Kate says, I wish the truckers would talk about working conditions too. They stand around for no pay and work long hours and get little sleep. That is true, right? They do work a lot and they do get picked on. I've talked a lot about that here. Kate says, got that one. Jessica Mai says, they should add public grievance over the government, corruption, and corporatocracy. Best show on YouTube. Well, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're here. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that they can add to the list. There's a lot of leverage they have, right? They are basically stuck on the other side of this. Byron Miller says the Ontario government has frozen the give, send, go of the funds. Next, they're going to seize them. Yeah, we saw that on Give, Send, Go. Thank you for that, Byron Miller. Molly F says, check out Australia Well Camp. They are coming. I'll look into it. Bear Ashby says, our government is going to keep lawyers in business. We don't get any funds for the government. We're on our own over here. That's how we like it. God Scalpel says, I love listening to him try to talk Canadian. I know it's painful. Everybody says it's painful. I know. Janiel Vargas says, love you, Rob. You've got a huge fan down in Miami, Florida. Well, awesome, Janiel. Thank you for that. It's good to see you. I'm glad that you're here. I have not been to Florida in a long time. I used to go out there a lot, but it has been some time. Beautiful place. A lot of freedom down there. A lot of crypto down there happening in Miami. It's raising some eyebrows, kind of perking my interest a little bit. Piquing my interest, yeah. Reese says, proud Youper here, UP of Michigan. Upper Peninsula. I'm proud to be standing with the Leafs on this. Thank you for your coverage, Rob. Many of my friends have been asleep the past 2 years and are finally waking up. Good to hear that, Reese. Glad that is happening, and thanks for your support. Wolfgang says, Ottawa City Council Zoom meetings are like Monty Python skits. The truckers are actually legitimate in their presentations, message, and their organization. Which is true. Yeah, I that is actually true. Ottawa City Council is a bunch of fluff and platitudes, whereas the truckers came out, hey, we want to talk. You want to talk? We're willing to talk. But they aren't. Wolfgang Deo also says, fire Fauci or at least zero out his salary. He'd probably bail. I think he's a grifter like the rest of them. Kareem says, a mother lost her child in the crowd last Saturday. She went to the stage for help. The person on stage described the little kid. We found him in 15 seconds. Kareem165 is also there in Ottawa, walking around. He reported back that he saw Viva the other day. And he's saying that a mother lost her kid, 15 seconds, found no problems at all. CBC says those are a bunch of terrorists. Bobby Moody says, there was a court order to freeze the funds today. What rights do the truckers have to fight for those donations? So my first question would be, well, they've got lawyers there. They have the Justice Center, right? And they showed up in Ottawa. And Ottawa I don't know, right? I'm not a Canadian lawyer, and I don't practice civil law, and I certainly don't practice in Canada. And so if this is all taking place in a Canadian court, right, Canadian lawyers are going to be there. But the first question would be, what are the due process protections that are in place? If they're going to make some allegations that this is a criminal group, what do they have to prove under Canadian law in order to justify that, right? What's the threshold? So, for example, if somebody... Let's boil this down to the personal level. Let's say somebody wants to file an injunction against harassment against you to stop you from harassing them. They file an injunction against you. They say you're doing something bad. The court might say, okay, we're going to issue this order very temporarily, but you, as the person who's being accused of doing the bad thing, you have an opportunity to contest that, right? You can request a hearing and go and challenge that and say, I'm actually not a bad person. They said I was, but I'm not. And the judge can then make a decision on what to do. So there are these types of proceedings that are very temporary in scope that will sort of, momentarily suspend stuff and then it opens back up, but maybe not, right? I don't know what the seizure forfeiture rules are in Canada. And so it could be a big problem. And that's not good, right? Certainly not good. Flagman says, Canada court just seized $8 million from Give, Send, Go. Thank you, Flagman. Wolfgang also says, amusingly, Bing gives La Send Go on the front page. They do. Mark Owens also became a member. Welcome, Mark. We've got Phil Goen says, funny, Trudeau cautions politicians to think about where they stand and who they stand with. Trudy equals WEF. Chrystia Freeland, WEF. Mayor Jim Watson, WEF. Michelle Repner Garner, also WEF. World Economic Forum, probably part of their young world leaders group or something like that. Yeah, we have Democratic Detox says Fidel Justin Castro has to go. Yeah, I think that's Fidel's son, right? Tillman Warren says, just announced they suspended the Give, Send, Go. Yeah, we saw. Thank you for that, Tillman. Not applicable says prediction. Rupa didn't Epstein herself. Hashtag save Rupa. Hopefully she's safe over there. Not applicable says the point is to be the CCP. 100% total thuggery, right? The same social scoring system. The same constant monitoring. L. Jones says, wait. Here's one. Wolfgang says, Ricada is a guest today on the You Are Here podcast. I already submitted my 12 pre-planned super chats. Ha ha ha, unbreaded. Well, good. Go check that out. You Are Here. Nick Ricada's on there. Sounds like he's going to have a good time. He's a awesome guy to listen to. L. Jones says, how is an American business Give, Send, Go under the jurisdiction of a Canadian court? So I don't know. I don't know how they are or sort of where they house their funds or what authority Canada has to go and seize that. But maybe they have some funds in Canada or a bank in Canada or some long arm where they're able to reach in there, right? It's complicated. This stuff is complicated. Steve Kuban, which is why I'm saying a judge might have issued it, but it may not stay long, right? Because you issue it sort of on an emergency basis, and then you provide an opportunity for people to contest it after the fact. Very good question. Let freedom ring, Canada, is from Steve Kuban. Thank you, Steve. Wolfgang Deo says, CA is also the national internet domain for Canada. I know that, Wolfgang. I was just being rude and saying California. James Kelly, GIF stands for Graphic Interchange Format, not giraffe. Thank you for that. Graphics Interchange Format. Randolph Schreiner says, is it illegal for Governor Whitmer to send equipment to Canada to move their trucks for a peaceful protest? Probably not illegal. Like, I don't know if there are any prohibitions on what a governor can do with government equipment. Maybe there is. I don't know. Right? It'd have to be sort of a local statute, I would guess. Thank you for that, Randolph. Garrett Dustman says, the gentleman that created GIF said himself that it's pronounced with a J sound. GIF. Just like peanut butter. Keep up the great work. We've got a war going on, folks. I'm going to have to do some research into this. It's going to be a complicated one. Maybe I'll have to make a mind map about GIFs or GIFs. Chase Junkie says, does a Canadian court have jurisdiction over Give, Send, Go? Can Give, Send, Go give them funds through crypto? So I can't imagine that Give, Send, Go would have a... I don't want to speak too out of turn on this, right? I don't know what the order says. Like, is it a not transfer order? Is it a Canada now is seizing these funds, like they're in control of them? But there's going to be, that's $9 million. There's going to be a lot of problems over this, and so there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of interest in jumping into this. We already saw when Give When GoFundMe did this, actually, GiveSendGo did not do this. When GoFundMe tried to do this on their own, there were attorney generals from all over the place jumping in on this, right? And so those same legal entities are going to say, wait a minute. Why are you doing this? And we'll see if there's any consequence of that. Wolfgang Deo says it's GIF with a G, not a J. Sorry, chat. Hell Pike says, big one. Thank you, Hell Pike. Says, taxpayers funded the vaccine production. Instead of shipping the vax to countries who need it most at lower rates, they prefer to sell it to taxpayers at $400 a piece. When everyone who wanted the product has already bought it, we'll just force the rest. That's from Hell Pike. Yeah, and so it's a great correlation there, right? You've seen a lot of people say that. It's weird. Why are all these products being mandated? Curious. Is there a financial motivation there? Is there an incentive there? We've talked about it here on this show. Let's take a look at Moderna. Remember Moderna, their stocks? Now, they're kind of all in the toilet now because of kind of the performance. But my goodness, man, for a long time. So see here, Moderna stocks, they're kind of in the tank now, but for a long time, man, they were up big time. And if we go back to the 1 year and the 5 year, look at this 5 year. Holy moly. Back in 2020 on this thing, right? December 2019, we go to March 2020 when we have the national lockdown. Look at the stock. 160, or back then it was at what? It was, I can't see what the number is. You can just see in the graph, right? Very, very low. And then we get all the way up to September 2021 and so on. It just goes up. And we've talked about this. I mean, massive money made. So what Hell Pike is talking about, does anybody think there's not a high profit motive involved with all of these policy decisions? Come on. Wolfgang says, Trudeau effed around and fooned out, didn't he? Wolfgang Deo says, secure the California AZ border now. Jackie Joe with the super chat and donation. Thank you. And Wolfgang says, GiveSendGo should halt. No need to make problems. A lot of very nice super chats today. Thank you, everybody, for those. And let's jump over to locals now and see what we've got here. So I think these are the... Still learning how to do all this right now. Yes, so I want to get to the first comments. And there were a lot of them. So I got to go to the very first page. All right, here we go. We have one from Engineer 12 says, for those officers who hold the line against unbeatable odds in the trucker revolt. Let's see what this is. Says, reason for filing this report, incident report. Date the feelings were hurt. Time of the hurtfulness. Location of the hurtful incident. Reason for this report, checkbox. I am thin-skinned. I'm a wimp. I'm a woman and have man-like hormones. I'm a crybaby. I want mommy. The weather is too cold. And a narrative. Yeah, well, they should send that over to the Ottawa City Council. And they'll have a field day filling those out. They'd probably be very in-depth. Mr. MVP is here. Says, as I see it, Jenna Ellis submitted into Congress 9,000 pages. All those records are part of the congressional records now. This gives we, the people, a chance to read and make our own decisions. Says things begin to change real big when 9,000 pages were filed into the congressional court. Can't wait to begin skimming some of them. Mr. MVP is like Mr. MVP of posting over at our watchingthewatchers.locals.com community. He's posting all the time, and they're always great stories. I'm like, man, this guy is so plugged in. He has the best headlines all over the place. Okay, we've got Brian Hack says, oh, wow, I've been to Windsor. They have good strip clubs on that side. That sounds nice. E. Dantes is here, says, I'm attempting to apply logic and fair principle to this trucker protest. I agree with the reasons for them, but I've been thinking about how Canada can bring this to an end. If Trudeau were to agree to reverse course on mandates, what happens when there's a protest for something I might not like? Think of all the BLM riots that happened last year in Portland, and I did not think that those were good causes. How do we differentiate this blockade between Chaz and Chop in Seattle? I think of a protest as a picket sign in park, to block a freeway. The bridge is siege tactics. Again, I believe the truckers have been harmed. Their freedoms have been impinged, and they are having real economic impacts. Going forward, how do we petition the government for a redress or wrongs using correct principles? This is my open inquiry for discussion. It's a great question, E. Dantes, and I think that there's a lot of good distinctions there. I mean, it's a really deep question. And when you really do sort of tease this out, right, you are You are balancing all of these things. You are balancing the interest of society. And I think James Madison talked about this when in the Federalist Papers, in Federalist something or other. I made a video about it. Maybe it was 10. I can't remember which one it was, but he talks about like balancing, right? You have to find the right balance. And that's why they had, the House of Representatives balanced with the Senate, the 3 co-equal branches. And so you are trying to find this, right? And at some point, when the government stops listening and becomes overly burdensome, people are, that it's going to get out of balance. And so, yeah, you're right? There are some similarities between Chaz and CHOP. I would argue it's not the same thing, right? Based on what I've seen out of it. But I watched a lot of that stuff too, and I think it's a different type of cultural vibe. But I understand your point, right? It's sort of different people objecting to the government in different ways, and we have to have a deep question about this because, yeah, what happens the next time they're objecting about something? But to be honest, there, Edon Test, right? They did lock everybody down, right? They did impose these harsh consequences on everybody, right? They did. They're saying what these truckers are doing is impinging their freedom and their ability to go out and do things and get a job and participate in society. These truckers had those same consequences thrown upon them, right? All of us did. We all got locked down for many months, and the whole thing was a joke. So it's sort of like, look, if they're going to play throwing elbows and play dirty, well, the other side has that opportunity too, and they have the full right and ability and authority. It's like I don't like it, right? I don't like the idea that we have to be in this situation. I would prefer there not to be a Freedom Trucker Convoy, honestly. I'm sure that they would want that too. I'm sure that they don't want to be there. But there's no choice because everybody's been backed into a corner by these tyrants for 2 years. They told us it was going to be 15 days. They've botched the response every step of the way, and there's no other options. And so if they're going to take away your livelihood and your freedom and your ability to provide for your family, parking a car downtown for 2 weeks, get over it, as far as I can hear. Monster One says, oh no, not Whitmer. You know what that means? At least half these truckers are feds planning to take out the legitimate truckers. FBI's probably there already. Great. Brian Hack is here. No, this one is from Facebook Law. Says, have you seen the video of the Canadian Conservative politician trying to remove trucks? They will take it from here. It's laughable. They don't get it either. And it's time to remove trucks.
I want to speak.
What is this? Oh, so yeah.
I want to.
Let's see what this is. This is here on YouTube.
Speak directly to Canadians who are demonstrating here in Ottawa and across the country. Your protest began with truckers, and you have grown into an international phenomenon. Men and women, children, young and old, from every walk of life and every community of this country have been rallying to have their voices heard. You want your freedom back. To all of you who are taking part in the protests, I believe the time has come for you to take down the barricades, stop the disruptive action, and come together. The economy you want to see reopen is hurting. Farmers, manufacturers, small businesses and families are suffering. I believe this is not what you want to do. We must all work together. You are protesting because you love your country and you want your freedom back. To the protesters here in Ottawa, you came bringing a message. That message has been heard. Conservatives have heard you, and we will stand up for you and all Canadians who want to get back to normal life. We will not stop until the mandates have ended. Today, though, I am asking you to take down the blockades. Protest peacefully and legally, but it's time to remove the barricades and the trucks for the sake of the economy and because it's the right thing to do.
Oh, God, she caved too. What a loser. All right, so she caved too. Look, she has to make that statement. It's actually not a bad political move. I was thinking about this. Yesterday she... Oh, stop. All right, so yesterday she came out and she was very sort of gung-ho in favor of the convoy and the protesters. But now guess what happened? The pocketbook hit, right? We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in, so it's not a laughing game anymore. And so she says you got to pack your stuff up and go home, even though there's really been nothing that has actually happened. What leverage do you have at that point if you pick up all your stuff and go home? There is no leverage. It's another promise from another politician. What? All right, so weird. Now, I understand why she has to make that, right? Because if she doesn't make that statement, then now she's sort of seeing as being somebody who is too far to the right, right? You know, look, I imagine if she doesn't come out and condemn the convoy, then she's going to be seen as somebody who is being reckless with the economy and reckless with everybody's lives and reckless with everybody's jobs. So she's going to come out here and give this, you know, I support you, but you got to stop it. And so she's trying to have it both ways there. That's very interesting. So that was kind of a quick flip-flop on that one. So just kind of like all of the other politicians we have. Thank you for that. So she doesn't have any idea. So C. Reed says, terrorist horns are aggravating the fish across the Detroit River. Seems the fish are 1/3 of the Biden voting bloc, so something must be done, according to Big Gretch Rona, probably. Yeah, the fish are the people voting for Joe. Dantes, E. Dantes says, GIF as in graphical interchange format. Wait, G as in graphic and G as in giraffe. Wait, scratch the last one. From E. Dantes. Brian Hack is here. Says someone in the chat said that a Canadian court froze the give, send, go. Yeah, we got that one, Brian. Kincaid says, hey, Rob, considering what the truckers are trying to do, I fear the governments are only going to give them another week, give or take, especially since that group lost their political power, their money. Care to venture a guess? Also, that shirt color works. Well, thank you. It's brand new. Yeah. So I appreciate it. You know, I don't want to sort of estimate. I don't want to over under the timeline there. You know, what these people are doing, I think is more meaningful than that. So I want to pay some respect. You know, I want to be respectful of what's happening there. Thunder7 says, Rob, please go read my entire posting. New words and phrases. Look it up. No, I'm not going to read them. Let's go Trudeau and GoFundMe. Blackface Trudeau being exposed for the lying swamp creature he is. The truckers broke the deep state. Another one from C-Rose says, hey, Rob, I'm from Windsor, Ontario. I've used the Ambassador Bridge countless times, including when I came to the U.S. for law school. We also have a tunnel under the Detroit River that allows smaller trucks and cars to pass. There is another bridge crossing between Sarnia and Huron, about an hour and a half from Windsor. Regardless, the people of Windsor are pissed off, and rightfully so. I have friends that plan on joining the protest at the bridge all throughout the weekend. Our local newspaper has pretty much echoed Trudeau's disparaging comments about the protest. I think the government and the media's comments have just poured fuel on the fire. Do you think Canadian news has unintentionally bolstered the support of protest across Canada? I do think that there is sort of this Streisand effect going on, right? If the media comes out and says there's a bunch of swastikas, and people go online and they try to search for swastikas, and they say, there aren't any swastikas. This looks very, very fun, a very peaceful, loving protest. And they sort of amplify it, right? So I think that maybe it is deserving them. Sergeant Bob says, Governor Whitmer, who listens to her anyways? Canadian politicians do not know what to do when Canadians stop being sheeple. DHS obviously has too much time on their hands. Psaki's here, painful as Kamala. Oh, well, almost. Canadian politicians thought it was just fine to close the borders for almost 2 years, except for the essential truckers. So why is it such a problem now? It's a good question from Sergeant Bob. Miss Lucky says, the Canadian border is now important. The Mexican border is not. I think Dilbert's pointy-haired boss is running DHS. Monster One says, I swear, if they start talking about shutting down the bridge to protect the border, my head is going to legitimately explode. Engineer says, hey, they don't have to follow that charter at all because earlier last year they disarmed their population. So maybe they're emboldened now knowing they're going to get away with this as well. Thunder 7 says the American Trucking Truckers Convoy plans to have trucks from all 50 states converge. They want to block illegals from coming in. It's been carefully organized with a number of different countries. And Canada has set the bar so high for peaceful protest that it's inspired the world. How does that song go? Baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. This one is from Vienticus, says, what I find most interesting about all of this is the psychological aspects. Read 5 Chimneys by Olga Langell. It's common for power-hungry people to be, with sociopathy, to be likable, so they can gain power over people and treat others like ants. And people like that tend to work themselves into places of power, fueled by the complacent. Then you have the psychology deniers that refuse to believe such things happen while supporting their abusers. We're also seeing whose principles about supporting the workers is based on actual principle instead of convenience. And then it comes to a head where you have situations like now, where the struggles are between the obedient and the free. And the question becomes, how much will those who worked in the shadows be held to account? Probably not at all, right? That's been a big part of problem that I've had with all of this. Who is going to be held accountable for all of their misstatements? And it's not just their statements, it's their policy prescriptions, right? Like, just look what happened with Cuomo. Nobody cares. Miss Lucky is here from Sergeant Bob says, overall, this is a proliferation of totalitarian government. By the time the average citizen realizes what happened, it's too late. 3 types of people: those who make things happen, those who watch what happens, those who wonder what happened. Super Bowl, a big nothing compared to what is happening. Stupid, stupid sheeple. Robute says, LOL, US Fed wants us to have trust in them when they gaslight, spy, and entrap and politically persecute people like in Afghanistan. Maybe allowing for live streaming in federal courts and more transparency might increase that risk. Jeremy C. Matridas here says, Rob, the summary of terrorism threat bulletin is a convoluted way to try to stifle our freedom of speech. If this line of thinking is allowed to prevail, we will have freedom of speech, asterisk. The asterisk would caveat that we are free to speak after Homeland Security verifies that our speech is approved. It is very concerning to have individuals in power that are dead set on destroying the country we love. The best way to analyze the powers and tools they are creating for themselves is to look at, ignoring their stated why. What exactly will they be allowed to monitor without infringing on the Fourth Amendment? Well, it's a very slippery slope. I mean, literally, like, it keeps changing. And there is a constant effort to give the government more power and less protection of liberty for the individual citizen. C. Reed is here with the mean, says, if you have an extra minute, seems now more true now than ever. This is the Are We the Baddies clip? Let me pull this one up.
Very well.
I'm not going to play, because if I play some of this stuff, I get copyright. You've seen it. Monster One says, the fact that a government agency in America can say this shows America is fallen. The entire point of the First Amendment is so the citizens have the ability to air grievances against the government. That's exactly right, Monster One, right? The whole point of that amendment is so that you have the freedom to lampoon your government. It's to call them all idiots and morons, right? That's sort of the freedom of the press. This is what they've been doing for thousands of years. You make fun of your incompetent leaders. You show that they're incompetent and you put somebody better in charge. And when you have an administration that says you can't talk about their incompetence, that's a big problem. It says when the government fears the people, you have liberty. When the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Another great one from Monster One. Kincaid says the trials will be treacherous if history is a guide, unless an entity from within the liberal oppression force does something. I hope somewhere a legislative defense is being devised that mimics the tendrils of deceit. First and foremost, funds must be protected and allowed to move freely. A lot of this starts with the money. I agree with that. Miss Lucky says, from Sergeant Bob, I have seen the heavy-handed throw tickets at them approach. It doesn't solve anything. That's from a former police officer in the House, Sergeant Bob, the one and only, wrote a great book. It's called Cop Talk. Get it on Amazon. Brian Hack says, hide your kids, hide your trucks. They're ticketing everyone around here. And that's from Brian Hack. Let's see what else we've got here as we do a quick refresh. Over on YouTube, a couple more came in. Jackie Joe with a super chat. Thank you, Jackie. Wolfgang Deo says, give, send, go should halt. No need to make problems. John F. with another one. Hey, Robert, look up Caesar Salad Express. That is how Canadians ran his dad out. Freedom Rally is how Trudeau 2.0 will be run out. The Caesar Salad Express. What the heck is that? The Caesar sounds delicious. Although the Express part, well, it actually looks like a Caesar Salad Express. Oh, well, here's what I see. A bunch of Caesar Salad Express kits. 4.8 user reviews. Couple 1 stars, though. Not so sure about that. We have here is an actual article. Prime Minister Trudeau and his 3 sons keeping over from UPI says, keeping their travel plans loose. All right, so I'll have to look into that later. I'm not sure what that's about, but thank you for that ping, John F. I'll dive into it. Wolfgang Deo says, meh, may as well make problems. What would Jesus do? Give, send, go. But they're not doing anything, right? It's not their fault. The other people, the government is the one absconding with the money. Robute says, remember politicians are snakes, and be cautious of Candice Bergen because she might be saying all the right stuff because it's politically expedient. Wait to see what she would do. Right? She's a politician, and so she's got to be supportive without being reckless, right? You know this game. Former LEO says, it looks like Meehan could use an enema. Miss Lucky says, Sergeant Bob says, we kind of like Arizona. Massive understatement. Well, I'm glad that you're here. One Tough Chick says, Joel Dolberg Acton so eloquently stated, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. By allowing these mandates, citizens have handed governments more and more power. Now these politicians are like little children who have been allowed to do as they please, and once you start to set limits, the bad behavior gets much worse before it gets better. To take back the power and return to enjoying the freedoms that we previously took for granted, we must stay the course. If we don't follow through, we would become like the parents who give in to their children when they throw a tantrum. Any parent who's made this mistake knows that if you give in even once, you will condition your child to believe that bad behavior gets them what they want. We can't allow politicians to believe that manipulating the narrative and misusing laws to suppress freedom of speech will be tolerated. Exactly right. And I think that's why it's important that everybody keeps holding the line on those lines, right? Freedom of speech. It's so critically important. If you lose it, you basically lose everything. Robute says, hey, Rob, Google is trash. Use DuckDuckGo or Quant as your search. Also, when you use a news article, you can bypass the mainstream media and their propaganda. Kareem says, I tried to find a new donation platform on Google after GoFundMe blocked the funds. Google refused to answer my questions, so I asked the organizers, and I know directly where to reroute my funds. Awesome. PWSMKAZ says, yep, we got this headline. Yeah, the funds are frozen. Sergeant Bob also says, I love the traffic site info. Having said that, body cams will negate the ID element. That's true. You could make that point there, Sergeant Bob. We don't get a lot of body camera evidence in a lot of our traffic cases. Those are mostly DUIs and some of the others. Let's see what else we've got coming in here from locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Sergeant Bob says, yikes, good thing I do not golf regarding the Waste Management Open. Robute says, Justin Trudeau walks out. So let's pull this up. Let's see what this one looks like.
Canada's Prime Minister is pandering to politics by division, stoking anger and fear. The rhetoric he used towards those Canadians who support lifting the mandate adds fuel to the fire. These are not the actions of a Prime Minister.
At the beginning of the pandemic, our government has been laying out with great transparency what we believe is the best way out of this pandemic, and that's vaccinations. And I want to give credit to the 90% of Canadians who've taken up that cause, the 90% of truckers who've taken up the cause of vaccinations to ensure that the wheels of our economy continue to.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased and grateful for the members' use.
It's really loud in there.
Grabbing this moment in our history because they know there is something fundamentally wrong when a Prime Minister refuses to listen. Countries around the world are changing direction, but here in Canada, our Prime Minister resorts to playground antics and calling names. If ever there was a time for inspired leadership, it is now.
You're not going to get any of it, my friend. Sorry, not happening. We've got another one. Former LEO says, I wonder how often Mika Brzezinski... I wonder how often Mika allows Joe to use her man bits. You know, Miss Lucky says, yep, a lot of officers are not on board with the politicians. Monster One says, Rob, early in the show, you said you didn't see any Confederate flags, but you saw some American flags. Didn't you know that they're the same type of flag now? The only accepted flags are the rainbow flag, the BLM flag, and maybe the Chinese flag. I forgot. Thank you for reminding me, Monster One. Also says, anyone want a good listen on how broken everything is should listen to Tim Pool from last night. He had Marjorie Taylor Greene on and Thomas Massey on. They get some good insights into the corruption in Washington. I'm sure it is good. Vienticus says, there was a tweet from the Ottawa police saying their lines are being taken up by people overburdening the system. Then they put their bot phone numbers up in a follow-up tweet. Says, yeah, that seems totally legitimate. We're having a problem with all these people calling us. at this number. From Vientica's Prime, Robute says, hey, Rob, regarding the frozen Give, Send, Go Fund Me, how would you enforce the action if they're based in the States? The premier of Ottawa is salty as hell. Yeah, he is as salty as hell. I'm not sure, Robute. I think I kind of covered that earlier. Tweak says, just wanted to let everyone know that Macron is a violent extremist who's spreading dangerous anti-vax propaganda. Report, French authorities feared Russia having Macron's DNA, resulting in socially distanced meeting. We all knew very well that no handshake and a long table. We would not accept that they would get their hands on the president's DNA. What? National Review. That's an interesting one. I'll save that. Thank you, Tweak. PWS MKAZ says, this is the most magnificent movement of all. A quote from John Adams' diary says, there is dignity, a majesty, a sublimity in this last effort of the patriots I greatly admire. The people should never rise without doing something to be remembered, something notable and striking. This destruction of the T is so bold, so daring, so firm, intrepid, and inflexible. It must have so important consequences and so lasting that I cannot but consider it as an epoch in history. John Adams talking about the Boston Tea Party in 1773. Amazing. Thank you for that. Here's another one from Lovely Gemini. Let me see what this link is. If these are links that I can't sort of instantly vet, like this one, then I can't play them because this is a live show and I just have to be extra cautious about stuff. So if that happens, that's why. Renee Ion Energy says, when you look at the Give, Send, Go, it's listed by Freedom 2022 Human Rights, which is a different organization. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, yep, read that one later. Tweak says, the convoy protest could change the way money is monitored, according to the CBC. Funded by GoFundMe, we've got, let's see here, they funded Detroit, they funded Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, Atlanta, New York City, Philadelphia, Portland, Minneapolis, yeah. But not the Freedom Convoy, because they are, of course, dangerous terrorists. Lovely Gemini says, you know it's about the Great Reset. Glenn Beck book tells all, with references from Lovely Gemini. Vientica says, I too remember when the GIF files were created and all the tech people were saying it with a J, because the guy who came up with it started it with a J. I think his reasoning was that as an acronym, it could be pronounced either way, and he decided to go with the counterintuitive way. The show is now about GIFs. Monster One says, Rob, if you Google how to pronounce GIF, it has a J sound. Also says, does Canada even have a COVID curfew after 8 p.m.? I do not know. Robert Vientica says, don't show it on YouTube because they'll hammer you, but just let people know to come to watchingthewatchers.locals.com to watch this link that I've linked up. Or let's see here what this image is. Freedom Truckers Convoy. Did we play this? Oh, this is a new one. Okay, so check this one out. Freedom Truckers Convoy. Yeah, we followed that guy before yesterday, but Vienticus is saying don't play that here, and we won't. Brian Hack says, could the distinction for legitimate protest be found in the freedom to peaceably assemble? I think that the intention was for the public to be speaking and not screeching like a banshee. Democracy seems to only benefit whoever's in control of the republic. Barry Goldwater had something to say about that. The Disability Act and demonstrators and physical. Okay, so I'm not sure where you're going with that, Brian, but I appreciate it. Vientica says, I've seen spatterings of reports of people already starting a convoy in Alaska and Paris and elsewhere. Tree Mendes says, I've watched Viva talk to some of the counter-protests and from people from Ottawa who want the truckers to leave. Some of them have even said they don't disagree with the protests are about. They just disagree about the way they're doing it. My question is, what are the truckers supposed to do? No one has listened to them for how long? I'm sure there are some bad apples that are a part of the protesters, but they've done everything possible to keep that to a minimum. They've made sure that every street has open lanes, and the police have blocked some of the others. They collected garbage and cleaned the streets. They've been shoveling the sidewalks. When the counter-protests were going on, one of the leaders was actually helping the police identify problematic people. I do have sympathy for the people of Ottawa, but do they have any clue how bad this could be? What do they think the truckers should do instead? It's a good question, Tremendous. Monster One says, Rob, there is zero comparison between Chaz and the truckers. BLM riots killed people. Chaz alone, 2 teenagers were ambushed. Not the same at all. That's fair. I am Techie says, just put myself back in the job market. And so far, every interview done, a requirement for employment is vaccination. Is this the norm now? Is there really equal opportunity if that's the case? Wild Child says the media leading people to look up swastikas is going to add a ton of people to the NSA watch list and the terror hate group. How convenient. Yeah, I mean, I've already been there for a long time, so it's like, whatever. You know, okay, that's fine. All right, and let's see. We had a few more come in. And then we're going to wrap it up for the day because we are going quite long here. Wild Child. So we got that one from Wild Child. Former LEO says, I was ordered to write citations and I was given a quota. If I didn't reach my quota, I'd be transferred against my wishes. Citation books hold 25 cites. I grabbed 3 and so did my partner. On our foot breast, we walked up the San Francisco Examiner and with the help of our radio cars, we issued over 500 parking tickets. I told the citizens I didn't want to be transferred for not writing entire cities. The watch commander went home mid each day with chest pains and never returned. Just following orders. Guess what? All the citations got dismissed from former LEO. Says here, Robert, no, really, check out the Wellcamp Processing Center. One of many. This is from the State Department, and it looks like it is the government of Australia. So let me pull this one up and see what we've got here. Here is this one. Queensland Accommodation Center over from the government of Australia. Look at this. It's a little camp. It's not a camp. I'm sorry. It's an accommodation center. It just happens to look like a concentration camp. The Queensland's Regional Accommodation Center is the first purpose-built accommodation center located at Wellcamp. It's from the center of someplace safe, and it's going to keep Queenslanders safe and supporting economic recovery. Critical role in the state's isolation and quarantine network. It allows us to enhance existing quarantine and isolation arrangements and provide accommodations to safeguard our citizens. Announced by the government August 21, first 500 beds are now operational, and they're going to start receiving guests February 2022. There you go. There's your new regional accommodation center in Australia. Just outstanding. Yeah, so horrifying is really the better word there. Another super chat came in, says, Rob, don't search for Caesar salad if you're hungry. Search for Caesar salad express Trudeau, and then you'll see a little bit more about this. Let's see here. We've got... So maybe I should do this on Bing because Bing is better. So Caesar salad express Trudeau. Trudeau's train, dubbed the Caesar Salad Express. What? It's still not working here, so I'm gonna have to find it later. It's from John F. Modern Finance in the house with a nice super chat. Thank you, Modern Finance. Wolfgang Deo says the truckers have no other way. Thanks, Trudeau. Sunny Prashar says swastika is Hindu symbol of well-being. I have respect for truckers, but please do not hurt Hindu symbols by relating swastika to Nazis. Yeah, well, Justin Trudeau has done a lot of that. Hell Pike said taxpayers, we got this one again. Yeah, taxpayers funded the vaccine production. Instead of shipping the vaccine to countries who need it, they prefer to sell it at a clip when everyone who wanted the product has already bought it. We'll just force the rest. Mandates, man, it's a good deal if you can get it. If you can create a product that you can force everybody to buy, it's a good business if you can get it. And that, my friends, is it. For one more, not applicable, says only reason we don't have camps is the Second Amendment, folks. And that's why it's the second. First one's freedom of speech. Second one's right to keep and bear arms for good reason. And that, my friends, is it for us for the day. Wolfgang Deo says they also hurt Germans and German Americans by constantly throwing Nazi around. And the only thing they... Oh, I see. You're saying there are, so you're saying there are German Americans that aren't Nazis, right? Just like there are Muslim Americans that are not terrorists, right? Or whatever, right? Of course, that's true. Another one from Modern Finance says, I can't find anything online that tells us what the offense the government claimed for offense-related Ontario would have to cite. So yesterday we talked about this, Modern Finance, the language specifically from the Ottawa police. I don't know in Ontario, but the Ottawa police were saying it was mischief, right? It was the mischief involved with preventing people from going and interfacing with property, right? You're preventing people from using and enjoying property. That's mischief to property. That's a crime. And they cited the criminal code wherever that press release was. And so if you want to dive into that, that's where I'd start. I would check in the Ottawa police. They're citing some criminal code, and it's mischief to property, essentially. And so that, my friends, is it for us for the day. Man, a lot of great questions, a lot of very generous super chats. Thank you to everybody who has been here and joined us on the program as we've been covering the Freedom Trucker Convoy. One of the more interesting things we've ever talked about here, if I can just be so blunt. I mean, it's been really, really a wild thing to follow. And I want to welcome our new supporter spotlight slide deck. We've got Dr. EMB in the house, who has joined up on our locals community as a spotlight supporter. And so thank you, Dr. EMB. Wolfgang Deo sent out a message. He's also a spotlight supporter, and he's asking for we got a link over to his Twitch. And so I want to send you over there. He's at Twitch at Wolfgang Deo, twitch.tv/Wolfgang Deo. And so shout out to our friend Wolfgang. Also, of course, my law firm, R&R Law Group, ericshouse.org, nonprofit I'm a part of. Very, very awesome organization. And so I'm giving a little bit of extra love to some of the people, who are supporting the show out there on the spotlight slide. We also had another one come in from Molly F. Molly F is saying, here, Rob. Okay, so sent this one over before we get out of here. Here's what we've got. Business Insider, U.S. military bases, coronavirus quarantine locations. Okay, this is from Business Insider. Let me pop this one open and see what we've got. Yep, here you go. 229 U.S. citizens were released from coronavirus quarantine this week. Here's where the 15 military-approved quarantine camps are. Oh, that looks fun. A bunch of quarantine camps you can see here. Seattle, California, San Diego, Riverside, Fairfield. We've got Colorado, Nebraska, Texas, Honolulu, Texas, Dallas, San Antonio, Atlanta, Georgia, D.C., New York, Newark, New Jersey, Detroit, Chicago, and other places. A lot of military bases, right? It's where they're all at. Ashland, Hamilton, Carson. Cool. And that article came out from about a year ago. And so, of course, you don't hear much of any of that, right? Actually, 2 years ago, February 20th, 2020. Very interesting from Molly Pop. That is something she says people need to know. And I agree with that. And that, my friends, is it for us for the day. One more shout out to the Spotlight supporters, and I appreciate all of you. We've got some new supporters to bring over to our watchingthewatchers.locals.com community. Big welcomes to Kimso, who joined us on the year. Roadrunner 60's also there. We've got Little Red Rose 89 joined up. P. Tatum's here. Miss Marple Wise, along with Facts Matter and Ask Why. Big welcomes to the community. We've got MJ K9. We've got Jelly of the Month, Jeff Rook, Ed Johnson, Airman Today, K Talking, C Reed, Dante Picante, True Blue Trucker, It's All Alley, Short Time Here, Richard's the Real, Lovely Gemini, and Wonder Girl 30. And that, my friends, is it for us. I want to remind you one more time to check out the links in the description for the Telegram channel. The Telegram channel, man, I'm seeing a lot of people just joined up over there. They are chatting away over there. And so I'm looking forward to that. Cool. And so that's it for the show. We'll be back here tomorrow to do it all again. 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Mountain. No, that's the same time zone. 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.